Imagine finding a once majestic German shepherd, now just skin and bones, hiding beneath an abandoned car. What one man did next not only saved this dog's life, but unveiled a story of resilience that would touch hearts worldwide. The rain fell in sheets that cold November morning as Michael Jenkins drove through the industrial outskirts of town. He wasn't supposed to be there. A wrong turn on his way to a job interview had led him down unfamiliar streets lined with abandoned warehouses and forgotten lots. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Now back to the story. As he slowed to check his GPS, something caught his eye in the peripheral of his vision, a flash of movement beneath a rusted car in an empty parking lot. Michael almost drove on. He was already running late, and the rain showed no signs of letting up, but something made him pull over, an instinct he couldn't explain. Grabbing his umbrella, he approached cautiously, peering under the vehicle. What he saw made his heart sink. A German shepherd, once powerful and majestic, now reduced to a skeletal frame, its matted fur clinging to protruding ribs. The dog's eyes, though, they still held a spark. A desperate plea that Michael couldn't ignore. "Hey there," he whispered, crouching down, extending his hand slowly. The dog cowered further under the car, a low growl rumbling from its throat. Not aggression, Michael realized, but fear, pure defensive fear. For 20 minutes, Michael sat in the rain, his interview long forgotten. He spoke softly, continuously, until the growling subsided. He had half a sandwich left from his breakfast in the car. Unwrapping it, he placed small pieces on the ground, each one a little closer to him than the last. The German shepherd's nose twitched. Hunger battled fear. Eventually, hunger won. Inch by trembling inch, the dog emerged, snatching the morsels of food before retreating. With each offering, the retreat became shorter, until finally the dog, a female Michael now saw, was eating from his palm. Her collar had rubbed raw spots on her neck, the tag so caked with mud it was illegible. When Michael finally touched her head, she flinched but didn't run. Her fur was ice cold. The job interview didn't matter anymore. Michael called the number he had been given, apologized profusely, and turned his attention back to the trembling animal before him. Somehow, he coaxed her into his car, lining the back seat with his jacket. At the nearest veterinary clinic, the staff moved with urgent efficiency as Michael explained how he'd found her. "She's severely malnourished," the vet explained after the initial examination. "Dehydrated, anemic, possible internal parasites. It's amazing she survived this long." "Will she make it?" Michael asked, surprising himself with how much he cared about the answer. The vet's face was grave. "The next 48 hours will be critical. She's a fighter, though. You can see it in her eyes." Michael filled out paperwork, provided his contact information, and paid a deposit for her care. As he turned to leave, the receptionist called after him. "Sir, what name should we put down for her?" Michael paused, looking back at the treatment. Room where the German shepherd was receiving fluids and care. "Hope," he said finally. "Her name is Hope." That night, Michael couldn't sleep. Images of Hope's scared eyes and bony frame kept flashing in his mind. The next morning, he called the clinic first thing. Hope had made it through the night, but remained in critical condition. Without thinking twice, he drove to the clinic, during visiting hours, just to sit beside her cage, talking softly as she drifted in and out of consciousness. Days passed. Michael visited every day, bringing blankets that smelled like him, reading to Hope from whatever book he was currently enjoying. The staff began to recognize him, smiling as he walked in, updating him before he could even ask. Slowly, impossibly, Hope began to improve. Her blood work showed decreasing infection markers. She managed to keep down small amounts of specially formulated food. And on the 5th day, when Michael approached her kennel, Her tail, once limp and lifeless, gave a slight, unmistakable wag. "She recognizes you," the vet said, standing beside him. "That's the first real response we've seen from her." "I'm just glad she's getting better," Michael replied, his voice thick with emotion. What Michael didn't say, couldn't articulate yet, was how finding Hope had awakened something in him too. The job he'd missed interviewing for had been just another, in a long line of positions he didn't really want. His life had been on autopilot for years after his divorce, but now, with each visit to Hope, each small improvement in her condition, he felt purpose returning. He hadn't planned on a dog. His apartment didn't even allow pets. But as Hope's, eyes followed him around the room during his visits. As her tail wagged with increasing strength, Michael knew his life was about to change in ways he couldn't yet imagine. And somehow, that felt exactly right. 2 weeks after finding Hope, Michael sat in the veterinarian's office, nervously tapping his foot as Dr. Sharma reviewed the latest test results. The German Shepherd's recovery had been slow but steady, a miracle according to the clinic staff. Now weighing 38 pounds, still severely underweight for her breed, but a significant improvement, Hope watched Michael with unwavering attention from her position on the examination table. "Her blood work is showing remarkable improvement," Dr. Sharma said, flipping through the chart. "The parasite infection is clearing up, and her organ function is stabilizing. She's not out of the woods yet, but she's defying all our initial expectations." Michael reached out to stroke Hope's head, a gesture that would have been impossible those first few days. Now, she leaned into his touch, her amber eyes half closing in contentment. "There's something else we need to discuss," Dr. Sharma continued, her expression growing serious. "We finally managed to clean her collar enough to read the tag and microchip information. Her real name is Athena, and she belongs to someone." The words hit Michael like a physical blow. Of course, the dog had an owner. A German shepherd like this would have been someone's beloved pet before whatever circumstances led to her abandonment. But in his mind, she had already become Hope. His Hope. "We've contacted the information. On the microchip," Dr. Sharma explained. "It's registered to a family about 40 miles from here, the Brennans. We left messages but haven't heard back yet." Michael nodded, trying to mask his disappointment. Of course, that's the right thing to do. As if sensing his distress, Hope, or Athena, pressed her muzzle into his palm, her tail making slow sweeps against the examination table. "What happens now?" Michael asked, his voice steadier than he felt. "We keep trying to reach the owners. For another week. If they don't respond, we follow abandoned pet protocols. Given her condition when you found her, there might be a case for neglect, which would affect ownership rights." On the drive home, Michael's mind raced with possibilities. Maybe the Brennans would be overjoyed to have their dog back. Maybe they had searched desperately for their beloved pet. Or maybe, and this thought shadowed his optimism, they were responsible for the state in which he'd found her. His apartment manager had already denied his request for a pet exception. "Rules are rules, Jenkins," the man had said with a shrug. "No pets over 20 pounds, nothing that barks, nothing with fur." Michael had begun searching for pet-friendly housing, but his lease wouldn't end for another 4 months. That evening, he received a call from the clinic. "Mr. Jenkins, this is Melanie from Westside Veterinary. The Brennans returned our call about Athena." Michael's heart sank. "Oh, what did they say?" "That's why I'm calling. They surrendered ownership rights. Apparently they moved cross-country 6 months ago and gave Athena to a neighbor who promised to care for her. They were shocked to hear about her condition." Relief flooded through Michael, quickly followed by anger. So the neighbor just abandoned her. "It seems so. The Brennans provided the neighbor's contact information and the clinic has reported it to animal control. But the important thing is, Athena, or Hope, as you've been calling her, legally, has no owner now." Michael understood what Melanie wasn't saying directly, so once she's healthy enough to leave the clinic, she'll go to the county shelter unless someone adopts her first, Melanie confirmed. Given her age, she's about 4, and her medical history, her chances at the shelter aren't great. The decision crystallized in Michael's mind instantly. I want to adopt her, officially. I thought you might say that, Melanie replied, and he could hear the smile in her voice. I've already started the paperwork, but there's still the matter of your living situation. Over the next few days, Michael threw himself into solving this problem with an energy he hadn't felt in years. He spoke with 3 landlords before, finding a small house for rent just outside the city limits. More expensive than his apartment, but with a fenced yard and a landlord who lit up at the mention of a German shepherd. My father raised them, the older woman explained. Most loyal dogs you'll ever find. If you're willing to sign a 2-year lease, I can have you in by next weekend. Michael signed without hesitation. He arranged to break his apartment lease, paying the penalty fee without complaint. He ordered dog beds, food bowls, high-quality kibble recommended by Dr. Sharma, toys, and a new collar, purple embroidered with the name Hope. When he explained to his parents what he was doing, his mother was bewildered. You're moving and adopting a dog you found under a car. Michael, this isn't like you. She was right. It wasn't like him, at least not the version of himself he'd become in recent years. But as he described Hope's daily progress, the way she now wagged her tail when she saw him, how she had begun to play with the stuffed lamb he'd brought her, Michael realized he was becoming someone new, or perhaps returning to who he had always been meant to be. A week later, Hope was cleared for discharge. At 52 pounds, she was still thin, but her coat had begun to regain its luster, and she could walk without trembling from exhaustion. As Michael clipped on her new leash and led her out of the clinic to his car, the staff lined up to say goodbye, many with tears in their eyes. You saved each other, Dr. Sharma said simply, hugging him goodbye, and driving to their new home. With Hope watching the world pass by from his passenger window, Michael knew with absolute certainty that she was right. The first night in their new home was harder than Michael had anticipated. Despite the comfortable dog bed positioned in the corner of his bedroom, Hope refused to sleep. Instead, she paced the unfamiliar space, her nails clicking against the hardwood floors, her breathing quickening whenever Michael moved. At 2 a.m., he found her wedged between the refrigerator and the wall, trembling. It's okay, girl, he whispered, sitting cross-legged on the kitchen floor. This is going to be your forever home, I promise. Promise. The word hung in the air between them. Michael hadn't made many promises in his life, not ones he'd kept anyway. His marriage had been a series of promises that had gradually eroded until nothing remained but paperwork and regret. But looking at Hope's frightened eyes, he felt the weight of this vow settle firmly in his chest. This one he would keep. He didn't try to force her out of her hiding spot. Instead, he grabbed a blanket from the couch and made himself a makeshift bed on the kitchen floor, close enough for Hope to see him, but not so near that she felt trapped. Eventually, her trembling subsided, and they both drifted into uneasy sleep. Dawn brought the first breakthrough. Michael awoke to the gentle pressure of a muzzle against his hand. Hope stood over him, tentative but curious, no longer hiding. When he slowly sat up, she didn't retreat. Good morning to you too, he said softly. Her tail gave a single, hesitant wag. The routine they established over the next few days was guided entirely by Hope's comfort level. The backyard became her sanctuary, a space where she could explore without the confinement of walls. Michael set up a lawn chair and worked remotely from his laptop, watching as she gradually expanded her territory, sniffing every corner of the fence line, occasionally bringing him a stick or leaf, as if presenting a gift. Inside, Certain rooms remained scary territory. The bathroom, with its echoing acoustics and unfamiliar fixtures, sent her scrambling. The bedroom closet, too, seemed to trigger something, perhaps a memory of confinement. Michael made notes of these reactions, determined to help her overcome each fear in time. Food presented another challenge. Dr. Sharma had warned him that dogs who had experienced starvation often developed complicated relationships with eating. Some became resource guarders, aggressive around their food. Others would gorge until sick, unable to trust that another meal would come. Hope fell into the latter category, inhaling her kibble so quickly she would immediately vomit it back up. Michael researched solutions, eventually finding a special bowl with built-in obstacles that forced her to eat more slowly. He established strict feeding times, reassuring her with his presence, but not hovering. Gradually, Hope began to understand that food would always be available, that hunger was no longer something to fear. Sleep remained elusive for both of them. Hope's nightmares came like clockwork, usually around 3 a.m. She would whimper, her legs twitching as if running, sometimes waking with a startled bark that left her disoriented. On the fourth night, when the whimpering began, Michael did something he hadn't tried before. He slid off his bed and lay down beside her dog bed, placing his hand gently on her side. "I'm here," he murmured. "You're safe." Under his palm, her racing heart gradually slowed. Without opening her eyes, she shifted, pressing closer to his touch. They stayed that way until morning. Progress came in small moments. The day Hope voluntarily approached the front window to watch the world outside rather than hiding from it. The afternoon she barked at the mail carrier, not in fear, but with the confident alert of a dog defending her territory. The evening, she brought Michael her squeaky toy, dropping it in his lap with an expectant look that clearly communicated, "Play with me." Michael documented everything in the journal he'd started, partly for Hope's progress and partly for his own. Day 12. Hope climbed onto the couch today, sat next to me for 10 minutes before jumping down. Her choice, both times. His friends and family noticed the changes in him too. His sister remarked on their weekly call that he laughed more. His mother stopped asking when he was going to get back out there and start dating again, perhaps sensing that he had found something that filled the emptiness he'd carried since his divorce. Challenges arose, of course. The thunderstorm that sent Hope into such panic she scratched through the laundry room door. The neighbor's teenage son, who thoughtlessly set off firecrackers, triggering a 2-day regression in Hope's confidence. The mounting vet bills as they addressed her various health issues, dental problems from malnutrition, a persistent hot spot on her hind leg, heartworm treatment. But with each setback came new resilience. 3 weeks after bringing Hope home, Michael woke to a strange sensation. Hope had abandoned her dog bed entirely and was curled against his side on the bed, her head resting on his chest, deep in peaceful sleep. Careful not to disturb her, he reached for his phone and snapped a picture, her first truly relaxed expression, no hint of vigilance or fear. He posted it on the community pet rescue page where he'd been sharing Hope's journey. Within hours, the photo had hundreds of reactions and dozens of comments. "The transformation in her face," one read. "You can see she finally feels safe." Safe. As Michael scrolled through the responses, that word appeared again and again. He glanced down at the sleeping dog beside him, at the absolute trust in her posture, and felt something shift in his own heart. A wall coming down, a space opening up. Hope had found safety with him, and somehow, in helping her heal, he was finding it too. 6 weeks after bringing Hope home, Michael received an unexpected email from the animal control officer who had investigated the neighbor who'd abandoned her. "Thought you'd want to know," Officer Rivera wrote. We located Jason Mercer, the man who was supposed to care for Athena. He admitted to letting the dog go when she became too much trouble. He's being charged with animal cruelty and abandonment. Attached was a court date, with a note explaining that Michael's testimony about Hope's condition when found would be valuable to the case. He stared at the screen, a tangle of emotions rising in his throat, anger at this man's callous disregard, gratitude that justice might be served, and an unexpected grief for what Hope had endured. As if sensing his distress, Hope padded over from her spot on the couch and rested her chin on his knee. At 68 pounds now, she was beginning to fill out into the majestic animal she was meant to be. Her coat gleamed with health, and the fearful look in her eyes had been replaced by something warmer, more trusting. "We have to go to court," Michael told her, scratching behind her ears, "to make sure what happened to you doesn't happen to another dog." The following week brought another milestone in Hope's rehabilitation. Dr. Sharma had recommended gradually introducing her to other dogs once her health stabilized, to assess her socialization skills. Michael had been hesitant, Hope still startled, at sudden movements and loud noises, but he trusted the veterinarian's judgment. The local dog park had a separate small enclosure specifically for cautious introductions. Michael arranged to meet Lisa, a volunteer from the rescue organization, and her gentle golden retriever, Buddy. Hope watched intently from the car as they approached, her body tense but not fearful. "We'll take it slow," Lisa reassured him. "Buddy is basically a therapy dog. He's great with nervous rescues." They walked the dogs parallel to each other outside the fence first, maintaining distance. Hope's ears flicked forward with interest, but she stayed close to Michael's side. After 15 minutes, they entered the small enclosure, keeping the dogs leashed at first. Buddy immediately lay down, projecting calm submission. Hope's tail gave a tentative wag, the first acknowledgement she'd shown of another dog. Gradually, they allowed the leashes to slacken, giving the dogs more freedom to interact on their terms. When Hope finally approached Buddy, sniffing cautiously at his face, Michael held his breath. The golden retriever remained perfectly still, allowing the inspection. Then so subtly Michael almost missed it. Hope lay bowed, her front legs extending forward, her rear end high, the universal canine invitation to play. "Oh my God," Lisa whispered. "That's huge." She remembers how to speak dog. For 10 precious minutes, Hope engaged in gentle play with Buddy, lacking the boisterous energy of a dog raised with constant socialization, but clearly enjoying the interaction. When she finally retreated to Michael's side, her expression was different, lighter somehow, as if a memory of her true nature had been awakened. That night, Michael added a new entry to his journal. First successful dog interaction. Hope remembered how to play, scheduled another meetup next week, thinking maybe she's not the only one who needed to remember how to connect with others. The last line gave him pause. Since his divorce 3 years ago, Michael had retreated from most social connections, work, home, occasional family calls. His world had contracted to these safe, predictable spaces. Finding Hope had forced him out of that isolation, from the moment he'd pulled over in the rain to the ongoing interactions with the clinic staff, rescue volunteers, and now other dog owners. The court date arrived on a crisp autumn morning. Michael had arranged for Lisa to watch Hope, not wanting to stress her by bringing her to an unfamiliar, crowded environment. As he dressed in his seldom-worn suit, he felt a surprising resolve. The Michael of 6 months ago would have dreaded this, might even have made an excuse not to attend. Now, he straightened his tie with determination. This mattered. The courthouse was intimidating, but Officer Rivera met him outside, explaining the process. "It'll be brief," she assured him. "The prosecutor just needs you to verify what condition the dog was in when you found her. We have the medical records from the clinic, but your first-hand account makes it real for the judge." Jason Mercer looked nothing like the monster Michael had imagined. He was an ordinary-looking man in his 40s, appearing nervous but not particularly remorseful. When Michael was called to testify, he focused on the facts: Hope's severe emaciation, her injuries, her terror. "And what is Athena's condition now?" the prosecutor asked. Michael pulled out his phone, showing the most recent photo of Hope, standing alert in the backyard, her coat shining in the sunlight, her eyes clear and bright. "Her name is Hope now," he said, his voice steady, "and she's thriving." The judge's sentence came quickly: a fine, community service at the animal shelter, and a 5-year prohibition on owning animals. Not enough, perhaps, but something. As Michael left the courthouse, Officer Rivera caught up with him. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." "This case affected you deeply," she observed. "It wasn't a question." Michael nodded. "She changed my life." "We're always looking for people to foster difficult cases," Rivera said casually. "Dogs that need special attention before they can be adopted. Someone with your patience and experience." The idea took root immediately, surprising in its rightness. The empty second bedroom in his house, the skills he'd developed with Hope, the growing network of supportive dog people he'd connected with. "I'll think about it," he said, though in his heart the decision was already made. Driving home, Michael took the long route, giving himself time to process the day's emotions. By the time he pulled into the driveway, Lisa's car was already there. As he opened the front door, Hope bounded toward him, her whole body wiggling with joy at his return. No trace remaining of the frightened skeleton he'd coaxed from beneath a car. "She did great," Lisa reported. "Even played with my neighbor's lab mix, who stopped by." "I did okay too," Michael replied, kneeling to accept Hope's enthusiastic greeting. "And I think we might be ready for a new challenge." 2 months after the court hearing, Michael's spare bedroom had been transformed. Gone were the dusty exercise equipment and boxes of unsorted belongings from his former life. In their place stood a sturdy crate with a comfortable bed, a bookshelf filled with dog training manuals, and a cabinet stocked with medications, special foods, and rehabilitation supplies. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Dr. Sharma asked during Hope's regular checkup. "Fostering is rewarding, but it's also emotionally challenging, especially when you start with a case like Luna." Luna was a 3-year-old pit bull mix who had been rescued from a fighting ring. Unlike Hope, whose trauma had manifested as fear, Luna's had transformed into reactivity and aggression. The shelter had been ready to label her unadoptable when Officer Rivera suggested Michael as a last resort foster placement. "Hope's ready," Michael replied, watching as his dog calmly allowed the veterinary technician to draw blood, a procedure that would have sent her into panic months earlier. "And I need to do this. For every dog like Hope that gets a second chance, dozens don't." Dr. Sharma nodded, understanding in her eyes. "You've done amazing work with her. Just remember that progress with Luna may look very different." The introduction between the two dogs was meticulously planned. Following the guidance of a professional trainer, Michael arranged for the first meeting to take place on neutral territory, a quiet, fenced field behind the animal shelter. Luna arrived muzzled, her body language a contradictory mix of aggression and fear. The shelter worker handed Michael her leash with visible relief. "She hasn't had a single application for adoption," the woman explained. "Most people take one look at those scars and walk away." Luna's face and legs bore the telltale marks of her fighting past. One ear was partially missing, and a long scar ran across her muzzle. Yet beneath these outward signs, Michael saw what others missed: the desperate intelligence in her eyes, the way she constantly assessed her surroundings, the same survival instinct that had kept Hope alive. Walking the dogs in parallel, maintaining 30 feet of distance, Michael felt Hope's curious glances toward Luna, but no tension in her leash. Luna, by contrast, alternated between pulling toward Hope and freezing in place, her body trembling with conflicting impulses. "Easy," Michael murmured. "Nobody's going to hurt you here." The words were meant for Luna, but Hope responded to his calm tone, moving closer to his side as if offering support. This subtle shift wasn't lost on the trainer, who had been observing from a distance. "Your dog is naturally confident now," she noted, joining them. "That's going to be invaluable. Luna needs to see what trust looks like." The integration into the household took weeks of patient work. Luna remained muzzled indoors, at first secured by a trailing leash that Michael could grab if necessary. Hope, to his amazement, seemed to intuitively understand her role, neither challenging Luna's defensive postures nor retreating from them. She simply existed alongside the traumatized dog, demonstrating through her daily routines what life in a safe home meant. By the third week, Luna's behavior had begun to fragment into distinct patterns. With Michael, she showed increasing signs of attachment, following him from room to room, watching his movements with the hypervigilance of an animal accustomed to unpredictable humans. With Hope, her body language slowly softened, the raising of hackles becoming less frequent, the tense posture occasionally relaxing into curiosity. It was only around strangers that Luna remained unchanged, lunging, barking, her trauma response overwhelming any progress. When Lisa stopped by unexpectedly one evening, Luna's reaction was so severe that Michael had to isolate her in the spare room, her distressed vocalizations audible through the closed door. "Some scars might never completely heal," the trainer warned during their weekly session. "The goal isn't to erase her past, but to help her build coping mechanisms for her future." Michael adjusted his expectations accordingly. His journal entries about Luna became more nuanced, celebrating smaller victories. "Day 24, Luna took a treat from my hand without snatching." Day 31. Luna allowed Hope to lie on the same couch, maintaining 2 feet of distance. Day 43. Luna slept through the night without alerting to street noises. The biggest breakthrough came unexpectedly. The segment producer coached him through what to expect, but warned that the dog's behavior on live television would be unpredictable. "That's their authentic selves," Michael replied with a smile. "Their unpredictability is part of their charm." Hope handled the invasion of strangers with remarkable composure, having gradually overcome her fear of new people. Luna, true to her more cautious nature, retreated to her crate initially, but eventually emerged, keeping a vigilant eye on the unfamiliar equipment. When the remote feed went live, the host in New York introduced Michael's segment with emotional flair. A wrong turn on a rainy day led to a rescue that would change multiple lives. Today we're speaking with Michael Jenkins, whose discovery of an abandoned German Shepherd has sparked a movement in his community. Michael shared Hope's story with simple honesty, describing that first moment seeing her beneath the car, the touch-and-go weeks of her recovery, and the joy of watching her personality emerge from beneath the trauma. As he spoke, Hope leaned against his leg, occasionally looking up at him with what viewers would later describe online as pure love. "And then you decided one rescue wasn't enough," the host prompted as the camera panned to Luna, who had cautiously approached and settled on the floor nearby. Michael explained Luna's background and the special challenges of rehabilitating a dog with her history. "The amazing thing has been watching how Hope helps other traumatized dogs," he said. "She shows them what safety and trust look like. She's become an emotional support dog for other rescues." What happened next wasn't planned. As if understanding she was being discussed, Hope rose and moved to Luna, gently pressing against her side. Luna, who would normally maintain her personal space, allowed the contact, even leaning slightly into Hope's larger frame. The host was visibly moved. It seems like they understand each other on a level we can't fully comprehend. They speak the same language, Michael agreed, the language of survival and recovery. Before concluding the interview, Michael made a point of addressing the realities of rescue work. It's not always this successful. Not every story has a happy ending, but every dog deserves a chance to show who they can become when they're safe and loved. The response to the segment was immediate and overwhelming. The rescue organization's website crashed from traffic. Michael's inbox filled with messages, some from people sharing their own rescue stories, others asking for advice, and many inquiring about how to get involved in fostering. The most unexpected message came from a national pet food company offering to feature Hope and Luna in an advertising campaign focused on rescue dogs. The compensation would be donated to the shelter that had helped with Luna's case. "You've started something bigger than yourself," Officer Rivera commented when they met for coffee the following week. "The shelter has received more foster applications in 5 days than they usually get in 6 months. Michael shook his head, still processing the sudden attention. "I just stopped the car that day." The segment producer coached him through what to expect, but warned that the dog's behavior on live television would be unpredictable. "That's their authentic selves," Michael replied with a smile. "Their unpredictability is part of their charm." Hope handled the invasion of strangers with remarkable composure, having gradually overcome her fear of new people. Luna, true to her more cautious nature, retreated to her crate initially, but eventually emerged, keeping a vigilant eye on the unfamiliar equipment. When the remote feed went live, the host in New York introduced Michael's segment with emotional flair. A wrong turn on a rainy day led to a rescue that would change multiple lives. Today we're speaking with Michael Jenkins, whose discovery of an abandoned German Shepherd has sparked a movement in his community. Michael shared Hope's story with simple honesty, describing that first moment seeing her beneath the car, the touch-and-go weeks of her recovery, and the joy of watching her personality emerge from beneath the trauma. As he spoke, Hope leaned against his leg, occasionally looking up at him with what viewers would later describe online as pure love. "And then you decided one rescue wasn't enough," the host prompted as the camera panned to Luna, who had cautiously approached and settled on the floor nearby. Michael explained Luna's background and the special challenges of rehabilitating a dog with her history. "The amazing thing has been watching how Hope helps other traumatized dogs," he said. "She shows them what safety and trust look like. She's become an emotional support dog for other rescues." What happened next wasn't planned. As if understanding she was being discussed, Hope rose and moved to Luna, gently pressing against her side. Luna, who would normally maintain her personal space, allowed the contact, even leaning slightly into Hope's larger frame. The host was visibly moved. It seems like they understand each other on a level we can't fully comprehend. They speak the same language, Michael agreed, the language of survival and recovery. Before concluding the interview, Michael made a point of addressing the realities of rescue work. It's not always this successful. Not every story has a happy ending, but every dog deserves a chance to show who they can become when they're safe and loved. The response to the segment was immediate and overwhelming. The rescue organization's website crashed from traffic. Michael's inbox filled with messages, some from people sharing their own rescue stories, others asking for advice, and many inquiring about how to get involved in fostering. The most unexpected message came from a national pet food company offering to feature Hope and Luna in an advertising campaign focused on rescue dogs. The compensation would be donated to the shelter that had helped with Luna's case. "You've started something bigger than yourself," Officer Rivera commented when they met for coffee the following week. "The shelter has received more foster applications in 5 days than they usually get in 6 months. Michael shook his head, still processing the sudden attention. "I just stopped the car that day. Anyone would have done the same." "But they didn't," Rivera pointed out. "You did, and that made all the difference for Hope." That evening, after the excitement of the day had settled, Michael took the dogs for their usual walk through the neighborhood. A light snow was falling, adding fresh powder to the existing drifts. Hope pranced ahead, confident and joyful, occasionally looking back as if to ensure her family was still following. Luna stayed closer to Michael's side, her vigilance now mixed with growing confidence. As they rounded the corner toward home, a neighbor Michael had never spoken to waved from across the street. "Saw you on TV," the older man called out. "Got me thinking about the shelter dogs. My wife and I are going to look this weekend." "Let me know if you need any advice," Michael replied, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with his winter coat. Hope circled back to him, snow dusting her dark fur, her expression alert and engaged with the world around her. No trace remaining of the skeletal, terrified creature he'd discovered that rainy day. Luna bumped her head against his hand, seeking reassurance that was immediately given. Michael's life had been redefined by a wrong turn and a moment of compassion. Now, it seemed, that redefinition was expanding outward, touching other lives, creating ripples of change that extended far beyond what he could have imagined. As they continued homeward, the three of them walking in companionable silence through the falling snow, Michael realized he had found something he'd been searching for without knowing it, purpose. Not just in saving these two dogs, but in sharing their journey, inspiring others, being part of something that mattered. Hope had given him that, a gift beyond measure from a creature who had started with nothing left to give. Spring arrived, with its explosion of renewal, dormant trees budding, flowers pushing through softening soil, and a noticeable shift in the energy of Michael's growing household. The national exposure had created unexpected opportunities, including a partnership with the local animal shelter to establish a specialized rehabilitation program for traumatized dogs, with Michael serving as a paid part-time consultant. His corporate job had gradually taken a back seat to this new passion. After negotiating a 4-day workweek, Michael dedicated every Friday to the shelter, bringing either Hope or Luna, sometimes both, as canine assistants in the rehabilitation process. Their presence had proven invaluable, especially with dogs who were too frightened to respond to human overtures. "It's like they can communicate something we can't," observed Elaine, the shelter's behavioral specialist, as they watched Hope gently approach a recently rescued collie who had spent her entire life in a basement cage as a breeding dog. The collie, who had growled at every human attempt to interact, cautiously sniffed at Hope, her tense posture gradually softening. "They speak the language of resilience," Michael replied, the phrase having become something of a personal mantra, since using it during the television interview. The pet food company's campaign featuring Hope and Luna had launched the previous month, appearing in magazines and as pre-roll on streaming platforms. Michael had insisted on authenticity. No glossing over the dog's scars or past traumas, no artificially happy narrative that minimized the ongoing work of rehabilitation. The resulting advertisements were unlike typical pet food marketing, showing Luna's still cautious interactions with strangers alongside Hope's confident engagement with the world. "Nutrition for the journey back to trust" was the tagline, accompanied by before and after images that didn't hide the difficult reality of rescue work. The campaign had struck a chord, particularly with serious dog owners and rescue advocates. The promised donations to the shelter had materialized, enabling the expansion of their medical capabilities and the hiring of a second full-time veterinarian. On a personal level, Michael found himself adapting to a strange new status as a minor celebrity in the rescue community. His social media following had grown from a few dozen friends to thousands of dedicated followers who eagerly awaited his updates on Hope and Luna. This visibility had led to speaking engagements at animal welfare conferences and invitations to consult on difficult rescue cases. "You need a proper website," his sister insisted during their monthly call. "Something professional that brings together all these different pieces of what you're doing." "I'm not running a business," Michael protested, though even as he said it, he recognized that his life's direction had fundamentally changed. His calendar was increasingly filled with rescue-related commitments, and his personal email couldn't keep up with the volume of inquiries. The catalyst for embracing this new identity came unexpectedly. A major animal welfare organization contacted him about a particularly challenging situation: a property seizure involving over 30 German shepherds being bred in deplorable conditions. Many were showing extreme fear-based aggression, making assessment and placement nearly impossible. "We need someone who specifically understands shepherd rehabilitation," the coordinator explained. "Someone the dogs might respond to. And honestly, we need Hope. These dogs need to see one of their own who made it through trauma." Something about this particular case broke through Michael's remaining hesitation. These dogs were like Hope once was, trapped, suffering, with potential that might never be realized without intervention. Before he fully thought it through, he had requested a 2-week leave of absence from his corporate job and was packing his SUV with supplies. The seizure location was 3 states away, requiring an overnight stop. Michael had never traveled with both dogs before, and the logistics proved challenging. Hope adapted easily to the hotel room, settling on the bed as if she'd always been a traveling dog. Luna, however, paced anxiously, alarmed by the unfamiliar noises in the hallway, growing increasingly agitated until Michael moved her crate into the bathroom, where the enclosed space provided a sense of security. They arrived at the temporary shelter facility the next day, a converted warehouse where the rescued shepherds were being housed in makeshift kennels. The sound of barking was overwhelming, and the smell of fear was palpable. Michael felt Hope press against his leg, not in anxiety but in readiness. Despite never having been a working dog, she seemed to instinctively understand that she had a job to do here. Luna, by contrast, remained in the car initially, the environment too triggering for her still-healing psyche. Michael would introduce her gradually over the coming days, carefully monitoring her reactions. The shelter coordinator, a tired-looking woman named Vera, greeted them with visible relief. "Thank you for coming. We've got multiple pregnant females, several who won't let us near enough to examine them, and at least 5 who resource guard. So severely that feeding is dangerous." "Show me the most critical cases first," Michael requested, clipping Hope's special working dog harness into place, a visual signal that helped her understand when she was in a helper role rather than simply on an outing. The first kennel held a male shepherd so aggressive that the staff had been using a board to push food into his space. His teeth were bared before they even approached, a deep growl emanating from his throat. Michael assessed him silently, noting the specific nature of his posture and vocalizations. "This isn't just fear," he observed. "There's pain involved. Has a vet been able to examine him?" "Not without sedation, which we're trying to avoid given his already compromised health," Vera explained. Michael knelt at a safe distance, allowing the dog to see him clearly. Hope sat beside him, calm and attentive. "We'll start here," he decided, "but I'm going to need a veterinarian on standby and a space where we can work without the stimulation of all the other dogs." For the next several hours, Michael demonstrated techniques he'd developed with Hope and refined with Luna. The careful approach, the non-threatening body language, the patience to wait out fear responses without reinforcing them. By late afternoon, he had managed to move the aggressive male to a quieter space and identified what he suspected was an untreated broken rib causing pain-based aggression. As he drove to the hotel that evening, both dogs exhausted from the day's intensity, Michael felt a clarity of purpose he'd never experienced in his corporate career. This work, helping these animals find their way back from the darkest places, was what he was meant to do. In the hotel room, as Hope and Luna settled into sleep, he opened his laptop and registered a domain name, Resilient Canine.org. His sister was right. It was time to make it official. The 2-week leave to assist with the German Shepherd rescue stretched into 3, then 4. Michael's corporate employer, initially supportive, began sending increasingly pointed emails about his return date. The reality was becoming unavoidable. His heart was no longer in the marketing strategies and quarterly projections that had once structured his days. "I can't leave yet," he explained during a tense phone call with his manager. "We've made breakthroughs with the most traumatized dogs, but there's still so much work to do." The response was sympathetic, but firm. "Michael, we've held your position for nearly a month. We need a decision." That evening, sitting on the floor of the small apartment he'd rented near the rescue facility, Michael drafted his resignation letter. Hope lay beside him, her head on his lap, while Luna watched from her preferred spot on the couch, close enough to be part of things, but still maintaining her space. The decision should have felt momentous, terrifying even. Instead, it brought an overwhelming sense of rightness. With the severance package and his savings, Michael calculated he could sustain himself for approximately 8 months while building Resilient Canine into a viable operation. The pet food sponsorship provided some income, and speaking engagements were beginning to generate modest fees. It wouldn't match his corporate salary, but it would be enough, especially if he downsized some aspects of his life. The website launched 2 weeks later, offering resources for those working with traumatized dogs, detailed accounts of Hope and Luna's rehabilitation journeys, and a blog documenting the ongoing work with the rescued shepherds. Michael also formalized his consulting services, creating packages for shelters and rescue organizations dealing with particularly challenging cases. By the time he returned home with Hope and Luna, the site had gained significant traction in rescue circles. Inquiries arrived daily, some from individuals struggling with recently adopted trauma cases, others from shelters facing difficult placement decisions for behaviorally challenged dogs. "You can't save them all yourself," Dr. Sharma cautioned during Hope's annual checkup. "There are limits to what one person can handle, even with helpers as exceptional as these two." Michael nodded, acknowledging the wisdom in her concern. "That's why I'm focusing on education and training others. If I can teach what Hope taught me, the impact multiplies." That philosophy led to his next innovation: weekend workshops held in his backyard, where small groups of foster parents and adopters could bring their challenging dogs to learn rehabilitation techniques. Hope and Luna served as demonstration partners and, increasingly, as confidence builders for the fearful dogs who attended. The transformation in Luna herself became one of the most powerful teaching tools. Videos comparing her behavior when first rescued to her current interactions showed tangible proof that even severely traumatized dogs could heal with the right approach. Though still selective about who she trusted, Luna had developed a special connection with children, showing remarkable gentleness during the family-focused workshops. "She was never given the chance to be a good dog before," Michael explained to a skeptical couple who had brought their recently adopted fear-biting rescue to a session. "No one showed her how. Hope became her teacher, and now she's becoming a teacher for others." As fall approached, marking almost a year since the viral video that had changed the trajectory of his life, Michael received an unexpected email from a literary agent who had been following his work. Your story, Finding Hope, Rehabilitating, Luna, Launching Resilient Canine, resonates with so many people, the agent wrote. Have you considered writing a book? Not just about dog rehabilitation, but about the way these animals have transformed your own life. I believe there's a significant audience for it. The idea was intimidating. Michael had never considered himself a writer, and exposing the deeper aspects of his personal journey, the divorce that had left him emotionally isolated, the depression he'd barely acknowledged before finding hope, would require vulnerability he wasn't sure he possessed. He mentioned the proposal to Lisa during one of their now regular coffee meetups. She had become a close friend and occasional assistant at the workshops, her golden retriever buddy, still serving as a perfect neutral dog for introductions. You should do it, she encouraged, her expression earnest. People connect with your social media posts because you're honest about the challenges, not just the successes. A book would reach people who need to hear that message of resilience. Her use of the word, his word, felt like confirmation. That evening, Michael sat at his desk. Hope and Luna settled in their respective spots nearby and began outlining what would eventually become the language of resilience. What traumatized? Dogs taught me about healing. The writing process became unexpectedly therapeutic, putting words to his own journey of recovery, parallel to Hope's and Luna's, clarified how profoundly the dogs had changed him. Before finding Hope, he'd been going through the motions of life, emotionally disconnected, professional success, masking personal stagnation. Now, purpose filled every day, and genuine connections, both human and canine, had replaced his former isolation. As the manuscript took shape, Michael incorporated stories from workshop participants, creating a mosaic of transformation experiences. The book's central premise emerged organically. Resilience was not just about surviving trauma, but about reclaiming joy and trust afterward, a lesson his dogs embodied daily. 3 chapters into the writing, a new opportunity emerged. A documentary. Filmmaker, who had attended one of the workshops, approached Michael about creating a short film featuring resilient canines' work. The project would focus on several of the German shepherds from the rescue operation, tracking their rehabilitation and eventual placement in forever homes. We want to show the entire journey, the filmmaker explained. The hard parts, the setbacks, the small victories that lead to big transformations, and of course, Hope and Luna as the pioneers who made this all possible. The timing aligned perfectly with the book project. The documentary would bring visual dimension to the stories he was writing, potentially reaching audiences who might never pick up a book on dog rehabilitation. As Michael signed the filming agreement, he reflected on how far they had come from that rainy day when he'd almost driven past a starving dog beneath a car. That seemingly small choice, to stop, to care, had initiated a cascade of changes that continued to expand in ways he could never have imagined. That night, sitting on his back porch with Hope leaning against his leg and Luna curled nearby, Michael watched the sunset and felt a profound sense of gratitude. His life had become unrecognizable compared to the one he'd lived before, and immeasurably richer for it. Filming for the documentary began on a crisp October morning, the autumn light perfect for capturing the rural training facility Michael had recently leased. The 5-acre property, complete with a small house and outbuildings, represented a significant financial gamble, but a necessary expansion for resilient canines' growing programs. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. We'll start with your morning routine. the director Sophia explained as her small crew set up cameras. Just interact naturally with Hope and Luna. We want to capture the bond that started everything. Michael felt self-conscious at first, hyper-aware of the cameras as he went through the dog's breakfast ritual. Hope sitting patiently as her bowl was prepared, Luna still preferring to eat in the quieter space of the utility room rather than the kitchen. But soon, the familiar rhythm of movement and the dog's focused attention on their food rather than the strangers in their home made him forget the filming. "That's exactly what we need," Sophia said approvingly. "The small moments that show their personalities and your relationship with them." Over the next several weeks, the documentary team became a regular presence, capturing workshop sessions, consulting visits to local shelters, and the daily training work with the 4 German shepherds from the rescue operation who were still under Michael's direct care. These teaching cases, as he called them, each presented different rehabilitation challenges that helped illustrate his methodology. Concurrently, the book manuscript progressed steadily. The literary agent had secured a publishing deal with a respected house known for thoughtful works on animal-human relationships. The editor's feedback pushed Michael to dig deeper into his own transformative journey, not just the technical aspects of dog rehabilitation. "Readers will come for the dogs, but they'll stay for the human story," the editor emphasized during their calls. "Your parallel healing processes are what make this unique." This encouragement led Michael to revisit painful chapters of his past, the gradual dissolution of his marriage, the depression that followed, the emotional numbness that had preceded. Finding hope. Writing these sections proved cathartic, helping him recognize patterns and connections he'd never consciously acknowledged. As winter approached, bringing the documentary filming to its final phase, Michael faced a new challenge. The most traumatized of the 4 German shepherds in his care, a female named Shadow, had plateaued in her rehabilitation. Despite months of patient work, she remained deeply fearful of most humans, accepting Michael's presence but retreating from anyone else who entered her space. "We've hit a wall," he admitted to the camera during an interview segment, "and this is important for people to understand. Recovery isn't linear. There are breakthroughs and setbacks, progress and plateaus. Shadow may never become a dog who enjoys meeting new people or visiting busy parks. Her version of healing might look different from Hope's or Luna's." This honest acknowledgement of limitations wasn't what the filmmaker had initially envisioned for the documentary's narrative arc. Sophia had hoped for a neat resolution, all the rescued shepherds placed in forever homes, their traumas overcome, through Michael's methods. "But that's not always how it works," Michael insisted during a tense production meeting. "Some scars run too deep for complete healing. If we pretend otherwise, we're doing a disservice to people working with severely traumatized animals." After lengthy discussions, they reached a compromise. The documentary would include Shadow's ongoing challenges, while focusing on what constituted success in her particular case: her trust in Michael, her comfortable coexistence with Hope and Luna, her gradual acceptance of Lisa and a few other regular visitors. It's about redefining what recovery means for each individual dog, Michael explained in the reworked final segment. "Shadow may never be a social butterfly, but she's found safety and stability. She's not in constant fear anymore. That's a form of healing too." This nuanced perspective enhanced rather than undermined the documentary's impact. When a rough cut was screened for a focus group of rescue workers and adopters, many expressed gratitude for the honesty about varying outcomes. Finally, someone acknowledging that not every dog can become perfectly adjusted, one participant commented. "It helps reduce the shame when adopters face ongoing challenges." As both the book and documentary neared completion, Michael's personal life took an unexpected turn. Lisa, whose friendship had been a constant support throughout the resilient canine journey, began assisting with the workshops and training sessions more frequently. Their professional collaboration gradually evolved, almost imperceptibly, into something deeper. The shift occurred so naturally that Michael only realized its significance during a workshop weekend when a participant assumed they were a couple. Instead of the automatic correction he would have made months earlier, he found himself momentarily speechless, suddenly aware of the feelings that had developed beneath the surface of their friendship. That evening, after the workshop participants had departed, Lisa stayed to help clean up. Hope and Luna moved comfortably around her as they all worked together, the dogs clearly considering her part of their inner circle, a status they granted to very few humans. "You know," Lisa said casually, as they finished putting away the training equipment, "Buddy really misses Hope and Luna when we don't see you for a few days." Michael recognized the opening for what it was. Just Buddy? The question hung between them, laden with possibilities. Lisa's smile, slightly nervous but warm, gave him his answer before she spoke. "No, not just Buddy." Their first official date the following weekend felt simultaneously new and familiar, dinner at a local restaurant that welcomed them with the dogs. The conversation flowed easily, built on the foundation of friendship but now charged with a different energy. As they walked the dogs afterward under a star-filled sky, Michael reflected on the unlikely chain of events that had led to this moment, all beginning with a wrong turn on a rainy morning and the decision to stop for a starving dog beneath a car. Hope walked slightly ahead, confident and purposeful, occasionally glancing back as if to ensure her humans were still following. Luna stayed closer, her residual caution balanced by growing security. Between them walked Michael and Lisa, their free hands finding each other in the gathering darkness. "I never expected any of this," Michael admitted softly. "The dogs, resilient canine, the book, you." Lisa squeezed his hand. "Sometimes the best things happen when we veer off our planned route." The truth of that simple statement resonated deeply. Michael's life had become unrecognizable compared to the carefully structured, emotionally safe existence he'd maintained before finding Hope. In its place was something messier, more challenging, and infinitely more meaningful, a life defined, not by security, but by purpose and connection. As they rounded the corner toward home, Hope suddenly stopped, alert to something in the distance. A moment later, a thin, bedraggled dog emerged from between two parked cars, regarding them warily, before disappearing again into the shadows. Michael and Lisa exchanged a knowing look. Some stories, it seemed, had a way of coming full circle. The street dog they'd glimpsed that night proved elusive. For the next week, Michael and Lisa took turns setting out food and a trail camera, catching only fleeting images of a medium-sized mixed breed with distinctive brindle markings. His emaciated frame and defensive posture told a familiar story of abandonment and survival. "He's not ready to trust yet," Michael observed, reviewing the latest footage. "But he keeps returning to the same area. That gives us a chance." The timing was challenging. The documentary was entering final edits, requiring Michael's input on various rough cuts. The book manuscript was due to the publisher in 3 weeks, and Resilient Canine's workshop schedule was fuller than ever, with a waiting list growing for the specialized training sessions. Yet neither Michael nor Lisa considered ignoring the brindle dog's plight. They named him Chance, both for the chance encounter that had revealed his existence, and for the second chance they hoped to give him. "We need a strategic approach," Lisa suggested. "The usual methods won't work if we can't get close to him." They developed a careful plan, establishing a feeding station with increasingly predictable timing. Michael brought Hope along occasionally, keeping her at a distance but visible, a calm canine presence that might eventually signal safety to the wary stray. Progress was painfully slow. 2 weeks passed before Chance would eat food while they were still in sight, hidden in their car, 50 yards away. Another week before, he would remain at the feeding station when they slowly emerged from the vehicle. Each small victory required immense patience. Meanwhile, the documentary reached picture lock, the final edit before sound mixing and color grading. Sophia arranged a private screening for Michael and the small team that had been involved in its creation. Watching the finished product for the first time was a surreal experience. "That's really us," Michael whispered to Hope and Luna, who had been permitted to attend the screening and were settled at his feet in the small theater. On screen, their journey unfolded with emotional honesty. The early days of Hope's rehabilitation, Luna's gradual emergence from defensive aggression, the expansion into resilient canine's broader mission. The documentary, titled Second Chances: The Language of Resilience, ended with a powerful montage of before and after moments from various dogs who had gone through Michael's program, including the 3 German shepherds from the rescue operation, who had been successfully placed in forever homes. Shadow appeared in the final scene, showing her limited but meaningful progress, peacefully resting in a sunbeam at the training facility, still cautious but no longer in constant fear. The credits rolled to appreciative applause from the small audience. Lisa squeezed Michael's hand, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "It's beautiful," she said simply. "It shows the truth, both the successes and the ongoing challenges." The film was set to premiere at a regional documentary festival the following month, with streaming distribution secured through a platform specializing in animal welfare content. The publicity would bring more attention to resilient canine, requiring strategic decisions about how to handle the likely increase in demand for Michael's limited time and resources. These considerations led to a significant conversation between Michael and Lisa during a rare quiet evening at the training facility. Hope and Luna dozed nearby, comfortable in the familiar rhythm of human voices discussing the future. "I can't expand much more without help," Michael acknowledged. "The workshop demands alone are becoming overwhelming, and the individual case consultations take enormous emotional energy." Lisa nodded thoughtfully. "You need to build a team. People you can train in your methods who share your philosophy. Not employees, but partners in the mission." "Like you?" Michael asked, the question carrying more weight than its casual delivery suggested. The moment hung between them, laden with possibilities. Lisa's involvement with Resilient Canine had been steadily increasing, her natural skill with the dogs complementing Michael's techniques. Yet they had carefully maintained the boundary between their personal relationship and professional collaboration. "I've been considering a change," Lisa admitted. "My graphic design work doesn't fulfill me the way it once did. Not since I've experienced what we do with the dogs." By morning, the outline of a new structure for Resilient Canine had taken shape. Lisa would gradually transition to a full-time role, bringing her communication skills and design background to enhance the educational materials while training alongside Michael in the rehabilitation techniques. They would develop a certification program for other trainers, creating a network of qualified professionals who could implement the methodology in their own regions. This vision of expansion gave urgency to their efforts with Chance. His rescue and rehabilitation would serve as a case study for the training program, documented from first contact through the various stages of trust building and recovery. The breakthrough with Chance came unexpectedly, during a cold rain that reminded Michael of the day he'd found Hope. They had arrived for the evening feeding to find the brindle dog huddled beneath a parked truck, shivering violently. Too weak or cold to run as they approached. "Stay in the car with Luna," Michael instructed Lisa, knowing that Hope's presence would be valuable, but multiple humans might overwhelm the frightened dog. With Hope beside him, moving with careful slowness, Michael approached the truck. Hope's body language was perfect, calm, non-threatening, but attentive. She sat quietly several feet from the truck while Michael knelt, offering food from his hand and soft words of reassurance. For long minutes, nothing happened. Then, almost imperceptibly, chance began inching forward, desperation overcoming fear. When he finally took the food from Michael's hand, it felt like witnessing a miracle, the first tentative thread of trust being formed. It took another 40 minutes of patient coaxing to get Chance into a crate in the back of the SUV. Hope rode beside him, her steady presence a constant reassurance during the drive to the emergency veterinary clinic, where Dr. Sharma was waiting despite the late hour. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, infected paw lacerations, and heartworm positive, she reported after the initial examination. But he's young, probably around 2 years old, and his blood work suggests no organ damage yet. With proper care, he has a good chance of full recovery. The choice of words, echoing the name they'd given him, felt significant. As they left Chance in the capable hands of the veterinary team for overnight treatment, Lisa turned to Michael in the parking lot, rain still falling around them. "This is how it all began for you, isn't it? The rainy night, the emergency vet visit, the uncertainty of what comes next." Michael nodded, glancing at Hope, now a picture of health and confidence in the back seat of the car. "Full circle. Except this time, I'm not alone." The simple truth of that statement encompassed so much, not just Lisa's presence in his life, but the community that had formed around Resilient Canine, the network of supporters who believed in second chances. For dogs like Hope, Luna, and now Chance. As they drove home through the rain, Michael reflected on how profoundly his life had changed since that wrong turn had led him to Hope. What had seemed like a detour had actually been the beginning of his true path, one defined not by careful planning, but by compassion, purpose, and the courage to follow where they led. The book launch and documentary premiere coincided within the same week, creating a whirlwind of activity that left Michael barely time to breathe. The language of resilience had garnered early praise from advanced reviewers, with particular attention to its honest portrayal of both the joys and challenges of rehabilitating traumatized animals. The documentary had been accepted into 3 additional festivals beyond its initial premiere, expanding its potential reach. In the midst of this professional crescendo, Chance's rehabilitation continued steadily. After 2 weeks of intensive medical care for heartworm treatment, infected wounds, and malnutrition, he had been cleared to join the household. His integration proved different from both Hope's and Luna's experiences. Less fearful than Hope had been, but more anxious than Luna in unfamiliar situations. "He's his own unique case," Michael explained to the small audience at his first book signing event. "That's something I emphasize throughout the book. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to rehabilitation. Each dog brings their own history, personality, and coping mechanisms." The moderator, a well-known animal behaviorist, nodded appreciatively. "You write about what you call trauma signatures, the particular ways different dogs manifest their past experiences. Could you elaborate on that concept?" Michael leaned forward, warming to the topic. Hope's trauma manifested primarily as fear. She retreated from threat, made herself smaller, tried to become invisible. Luna's expressed as reactivity. She learned to attack first because defense hadn't protected her. Chance shows hypervigilance, constant, scanning for danger, difficulty relaxing, startled responses to normal household sounds. He paused, glancing at Lisa in the front row, who gave an encouraging nod. "Understanding these different signatures helps us tailor rehabilitation approaches." A method that works for a fear-based response might actually worsen a reactive one. That's why cookie-cutter training advice often fails with trauma cases. The event concluded with a long line of readers waiting for signed copies, many sharing stories of their own rescue dogs. Michael listened to each with genuine interest, recognizing the universal elements that connected these narratives to his own experience with Hope. The documentary premiere 3 days later brought a different kind of visibility. Held at a mid-sized independent theater, the screening attracted not only dog enthusiasts, but filmmakers and journalists interested in the human-animal bond. Michael, Lisa, and Sophia participated in a panel discussion afterward. The conversation, ranging from technical aspects of filming with traumatized animals to the ethical considerations of sharing their stories. "We were very conscious of not exploiting their trauma," Sophia emphasized. "The focus was always on recovery and resilience, not dwelling on the suffering they endured." A question from the audience addressed the elephant in the room. Given the success of both the book and documentary, how are you planning to scale Resilient Canine without compromising the personalized approach that makes it work? It was Lisa who answered, outlining the vision they had been refining over the past months. "We're developing a certification program for trainers who want to work specifically with trauma cases, not mass-producing generic methods, but creating a network of specialists who understand the nuanced approach required, quality over quantity." The next morning's local newspaper featured a photograph of Michael with Hope and Luna at the premiere, the headline reading, "From Rescue to Revolution, How One Man's Compassion is Changing Animal Rehabilitation." The article detailed Resilient Canine's growth from personal journey to recognized methodology, with quotes from veterinarians and behaviorists affirming the importance of trauma-informed approaches to animal welfare. With public events behind them, Michael and Lisa turned their attention to the next phase of Resilient Canine's development, securing a larger property that would serve as both training facility and sanctuary for cases like Shadow, who needed ongoing specialized care rather than traditional adoption. The search had narrowed to 3 potential locations, each offering different advantages. "This one has more acreage," Michael noted as they walked the perimeter of a former equestrian center 30 minutes from town. "But the buildings would need significant renovation to serve our purposes." Lisa gestured toward the sprawling main structure. "The bone is good, though. And look at this setting. The natural environment would be perfect for the dogs who need more space and fewer triggers." Hope, Luna, and Chance explored the property alongside them, their behavior offering valuable insight. Hope moved with confidence, investigating the various outbuildings with interest. Luna maintained her typical caution, but showed no signs of anxiety. Most telling was Chance's response, his usually vigilant posture relaxing as he sniffed along the tree line, tail gaining a slight wag. "They approve," Michael observed with a smile, "especially Chance." The choice became clearer when they compared financial projections for each property. The equestrian center required more immediate investment, but offered long-term expansion, possibilities that aligned with their vision. A meeting with the bank the following week confirmed what they had hoped. With the advance from the book, revenue from the documentary, and growing income from workshops and consulting, a mortgage was within reach. As they signed the initial paperwork, Lisa squeezed Michael's hand beneath the table. From finding one starving dog to building a sanctuary, not bad for 2 years' work. The scope of what they were undertaking sometimes overwhelmed Michael when he allowed himself to fully consider it. The responsibility of creating a sustainable organization that would continue helping traumatized dogs long after him. The financial commitment of a mortgage and renovation costs. The logistics of moving their current operation to the new location. while maintaining the rehabilitation programs already in progress. These thoughts weighed on him as they drove home from the bank, manifesting as uncharacteristic silence. Lisa gave him space, understanding his process well enough by now to recognize when he needed to work through concerns internally. It was Hope who broke through his preoccupation. Seated behind him in the car, she suddenly pressed her muzzle between the headrest and door, resting her chin on his shoulder, a gesture of connection she offered rarely but always at moments when he seemed to need it most. The simple touch grounded him, bringing clarity to the swirling thoughts. This work, helping dogs like Hope, Luna, and Chance reclaim their lives, wasn't just what he did now. It was who he was. The challenges ahead were simply part of the journey, no different in essence from those he'd already navigated. That evening, as all three dogs settled in their various preferred spots around the living room, Hope at Michael's feet, Luna on her designated corner of the couch, Chance in the bed, tucked beside the bookshelf, Lisa brought out architectural plans she'd been sketching for the new facility. "I've been playing with layouts," she explained, spreading the drawings across the coffee table. "Training spaces here, rehabilitation kennels with indoor-outdoor access there, sanctuary spaces for the long-term residents toward the back for maximum quiet." Michael studied the plans, impressed by the thoughtfulness of the design. "You've been thinking about this for a while." "Since we first started talking about expansion," she admitted. "My design background finally comes in handy for something that really matters." As they refined the concept together, adding and adjusting elements, Michael felt the last of his anxiety dissipate. This new chapter for Resilient Canine wasn't a departure from the path that had begun with Finding Hope. It was its natural evolution. Each dog saved created ripples of change, expanding outward to touch more lives, both canine and human. Later, lying in bed with Hope and Luna on the floor nearby, and Chance in his crate by the window, still not comfortable sleeping fully exposed, Michael reflected on the remarkable journey from that rainy day to this moment. The wrong turn that had led him to Hope had ultimately led him right where he was meant to be. The renovation of the Equestrian Center into Resilient Canine's new headquarters progressed in stages, each completion bringing the vision closer to reality. The first priority had been the main residential structure, transforming the former ranch manager's house into a comfortable home for Michael, Lisa, and the dogs, with dedicated office space for the growing administrative demands of the organization. Moving day arrived on a clear spring morning, exactly 2 years after Michael had found Hope beneath that abandoned car. The symmetry wasn't lost on him as he watched the three dogs explore their new territory. Hope confidently leading the way, Luna following with cautious interest, and Chance bringing up the rear, still startling at unexpected sounds, but recovering more quickly each time. "They seem to approve," Lisa remarked, joining him on the porch after directing the movers where to place the last pieces of furniture. Michael nodded, watching as Hope discovered a shallow stream at the property's edge, wading in without hesitation. Hope's never had this much space before. None of them have. The first 6 weeks in the new location focused on settling into routines and completing the renovation of what would become the training center, a converted indoor riding arena now divided into specialized spaces for group classes, individual rehabilitation sessions, and educational seminars. Contractors worked steadily on the kennel building, designed with trauma-informed features like visual barriers between runs, sound-dampening materials, and access to private outdoor spaces for each resident. As work progressed, unexpected challenges emerged. The rural location, while ideal for the dogs, complicated internet connectivity, essential for the online aspects of Resilient Canine's programs. Zoning regulations required additional paperwork and hearings, and the physical demands of maintaining such a large property proved more taxing than anticipated. "We need help," Lisa stated plainly one evening, both of them exhausted after a day split between training sessions with client dogs and property maintenance, not just occasionally, regular staff. Michael had been reluctant to expand beyond their core team, worried about finding people who truly understood the mission and methodology. But the reality had become undeniable. Resilient Canine had grown beyond what two people could manage, even with occasional volunteer assistance. The solution presented itself unexpectedly. During a workshop weekend focused on shelter staff training, Michael connected with Jamal, a former military canine handler transitioning to civilian life. His insight into canine behavior impressed Michael, particularly his observations about the similarities between combat stress in military dogs and the trauma patterns seen in severely abused rescues. "They're processing the same fundamental rupture of safety," Jamal explained during a lunch break. "Whether it's from war zones or fighting rings, the brain responds to extreme threat in predictable ways. The healing process requires rebuilding that sense of safety from the ground up." By the end of the weekend, Michael had offered Jamal a position, part apprenticeship, part facilities management. His military background provided both the discipline for the physical demands of the property and the patience required for trauma rehabilitation. Jamal's arrival coincided with the completion of the kennel building, allowing Resilient Canine to accept its first long-term rehabilitation cases beyond Michael's personal rescues. Among them was a senior Labrador named Duke, surrendered to a shelter after 10 years with the same family, who had shut down completely in the kennel environment, refusing food, human contact, and exhibiting severe depression. "Different trauma, same fundamental need," Michael explained as he and Jamal worked with Duke. His whole world vanished overnight. He's grieving, not just afraid. Hope proved instrumental in Duke's rehabilitation, her calm confidence providing a bridge between the traumatized Labrador and the humans trying to help him. She seemed to instinctively understand when to engage and when to simply exist peacefully in his presence, modeling the trust that Duke had lost. The documentary's wider release brought another wave of attention to Resilient Canine. Streaming numbers exceeded expectations, and speaking requests poured in from across the country. Michael found himself carefully balancing these opportunities for outreach with the hands-on work that remained his primary passion. One such opportunity, however, proved too significant to decline. The National Veterinary Association invited him to deliver a keynote address at their annual conference, focusing on trauma-informed approaches to behavioral medicine. It would be his largest audience yet, over 2,000 veterinary professionals, who could implement his methods in practices nationwide. Preparing the presentation consumed weeks of effort. Michael was determined to provide not just inspiration, but practical, actionable insights that attendees could immediately apply. Lisa's design background proved invaluable as they created visual aids illustrating the key concepts of trauma, signatures, and resilience-focused rehabilitation. The evening before they were scheduled to depart for the conference, Michael took the dogs for a final walk around the property. The sunset painted the renovated buildings in golden light, the training center and kennel structure now fully operational, the sanctuary spaces for long-term residents taking shape on the far side of the property. Hope trotted ahead as usual, occasionally glancing back to ensure her people and packmates were following. At 6 years old, she was in her prime, powerful, confident, the picture of radiant health so different from the skeletal, terrified creature Michael had coaxed from beneath that car. The contrast between that first day and this moment overwhelmed him suddenly. He stopped walking, overcome by the magnitude of the journey. Lisa noticed immediately, pausing beside him. "What is it?" she asked, concern in her voice. Michael gestured toward Hope, now playfully engaging Luna in a brief chase. "Sometimes I can still see her as she was that first day, so broken, so afraid. It hits me all at once, how far she's come, how far we've all come. Lisa slipped her hand into his. And how many others are finding their way because of what she taught you? The truth of that statement was evident. In the facility surrounding them, each building, each program, each rescued dog representing the expanding ripples of that single act of compassion on a rainy day. Hope circled back to them, her expression alert and engaged with her world, secure in her place within it. Michael knelt to ruffle the fur around her neck, finding the small patch where her collar had once rubbed away the hair. The fur had long since grown back, but he knew exactly where the scar tissue remained beneath, visible no longer, but part of her story nonetheless. "The scars don't disappear," he said quietly, as much to himself as to Lisa. "They just stop defining the whole story." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As they resumed their walk, completing the circuit that would take them back to their home, Michael felt a deep sense of rightness. The path ahead would undoubtedly bring new challenges, more dogs needing the specialized care they could provide, more opportunities to expand their impact, more learning and growth for Resilient Canine as an organization. But the foundation had been built on something unshakable, the transformative power of compassion, patience, and the resilience that Hope had embodied from the moment she took that first hesitant step out from beneath the car. Michael's keynote address at the veterinary conference exceeded all expectations. Standing before 2,000 professionals, he spoke not as an academic expert, but as someone whose life had been transformed by a single act of compassion. The presentation wove together Hope's story, the scientific underpinnings of trauma response in animals and practical applications for veterinary practices. Traditional behavior modification often fails with trauma cases because it addresses symptoms without recognizing the underlying neurological and emotional damage, he explained, showing side-by-side videos of Hope's early rehabilitation compared with standard training approaches. When we shift our focus to rebuilding a sense of safety first, everything else becomes possible. The response was overwhelming. A standing ovation followed by a line of veterinarians waiting to speak with him individually, many sharing their own frustrations with cases they hadn't been able to help through conventional methods. By the end of the conference, Michael had invitations to conduct training workshops at veterinary schools across the country. "This is how we scale," Lisa observed as they drove home. "Not by handling more cases ourselves, but by changing how the profession approaches trauma from the ground up." The whirlwind of the conference had barely settled when a new challenge emerged. A devastating hurricane had struck the Gulf Coast, leaving countless animals displaced or abandoned. The emergency response coordinator for a national animal welfare organization reached out to Michael directly. "We've got temporary shelters overflowing with traumatized animals," she explained during their call, "many showing severe stress behaviors that make assessment and placement difficult. We need your expertise on the ground." The request presented a difficult decision. The Resilient Canine facility was fully operational but still finding its rhythm. With the recent expansion, Jamal was proving invaluable but was still learning the nuances of their methodology. Leaving for what could be weeks would disrupt the progress of the dogs currently in rehabilitation. Yet the scale of the disaster made refusal impossible. After careful consideration, Michael and Lisa developed a plan. Lisa would remain at the facility with Jamal, ensuring continuity for the resident dogs. Michael would travel to the disaster area with Hope, whose steady temperament and demonstration value would be assets in the crisis environment. The separation would be their longest since becoming a couple, and the first time Hope would be away from Luna and Chance for an extended period. The night before departure, Lisa helped Michael pack specialized equipment and resources for the mission. 2 weeks, he promised, zipping the final duffel bag. 3 at most. Lisa nodded, her concern visible despite her supportive words. You'll make a difference for so many animals. Just take care of yourself too. Disaster zones are traumatic, for humans as well. The journey to the Gulf Coast took them through areas of increasing devastation, first downed trees and power lines, then structural damage to buildings, and finally, whole neighborhoods reduced to scattered debris. The emergency animal shelter had been established in a former convention center on higher ground, its cavernous interior now filled with rows of temporary kennels, each housing a shell-shocked survivor. The facility manager, an exhausted woman named Vanessa, greeted them with visible relief. "Thank you for coming. We've got over 400 animals here, many pulled from floodwaters or found wandering in devastated areas. The noise level alone is triggering for the traumatized ones, let alone the unfamiliar environment and constant stream of strangers." Michael took in the overwhelming scene, the cacophony of barking, the frantic movement of volunteers between kennels, the pervasive smell of wet fur and disinfectant. Beside him, Hope remained calm but alert, her body language communicating steady confidence despite the chaos. "Let's start with triage," Michael suggested. "Identify the most severely traumatized cases where our intervention can make the biggest difference for their immediate welfare and eventual placement." The next 72 hours passed in a blur of focused work. Michael established a quieter area within the facility for the most stressed animals, implemented simple environmental modifications to reduce visual triggers, and trained volunteers in basic trauma-informed handling techniques. Hope's presence proved even more valuable than anticipated, her calm demeanor providing a living example of the recovery possible for these traumatized survivors. By the end of the first week, measurable improvements were visible throughout the shelter. Barking had decreased significantly as stress levels lowered. Feeding protocols adjusted to accommodate fearful dogs had improved nutrition intake. Most importantly, the volunteers had embraced the trauma-informed approach, changing how they interacted with the animals in their care. During a rare break, Michael called Lisa to update her on their progress. "It's making a difference," he reported, exhaustion evident in his voice despite the satisfaction. "And Hope is incredible here. The volunteers call her the Zen Master. She models calm for the other dogs and seems to instinctively know which ones need her attention most." "How are you holding up?" Lisa asked, concern evident. Michael hesitated, the weight of what he was witnessing catching in his throat. "It's hard. So many animals traumatized, so many people who've lost everything, but being able to help, to see even small improvements, it matters." The call with Lisa centered him, providing perspective that helped him continue the demanding work. As the second week progressed, the emergency operation began transitioning toward longer-term solutions. Animals were being transferred to partner shelters in unaffected areas. Reunifications with owners occurred daily as lost pet databases were cross-referenced with the shelter population. For the most traumatized cases, however, traditional shelter environments would likely trigger further regression. Michael worked with the emergency response team to identify specialized rescue partners capable of continuing the trauma-informed care these animals would need. During this process, he encountered a case that resonated deeply with Hope's story. A German Shepherd mix, approximately 3 years old, had been found trapped in an attic as floodwaters rose around the abandoned house. Her physical injuries were healing, but psychologically she remained profoundly shut down, unresponsive to human interaction, refusing food when people were present, trembling constantly. "She's one of our most concerning cases," Vanessa admitted. Most volunteers can't even approach a kennel without triggering a panic response. Michael sat quietly outside the dog's kennel, Hope beside him, observing without intervention. After nearly an hour, he saw what he was looking for, the slightest change in her posture when Hope came into her line of sight. Not relaxation, exactly, but a momentary focus on something beyond her own fear. Over the next 3 days, Michael worked patiently with the shepherd mix, whom staff had named Willow. Progress came in tiny increments, first taking food from a long-handled spoon while Hope was visible nearby, then tolerating Michael's presence at a distance while not eating. Finally, the breakthrough moment when she briefly sniffed Hope. Through the kennel fence, the first voluntary interaction she had initiated. As Michael's scheduled departure approached, Willow's future remained uncertain. She had begun the journey toward recovery, but would need specialized, consistent care to continue progressing. The list of potential placement partners had none, with specific experience rehabilitating severely traumatized German shepherds. The night before, he was set to return home. Michael sat alone in his temporary housing, reflecting on the past 3 weeks. The disaster response had been successful beyond expectations. Protocols established, volunteers trained, systems in place that would continue helping animals long after his departure. Yet Willow's uncertain fate weighed heavily on him. Hope, sensing his preoccupation, pressed against his leg, her steady presence a reminder of what was possible with time and proper care. Michael stroked her head, the decision crystallizing as he did. Before he could second-guess himself, he called, "Lisa." "There's a dog here," he began, then paused, uncertain how to continue. "I was wondering when you'd call about that," Lisa replied, surprising him. "Jamal mentioned you've been spending extra time with a particular case." The understanding in her voice gave him courage to continue. "She's a German shepherd mix, severely traumatized, but showing the first signs of recovery. There's no good placement option for her here." "What's her name?" Lisa asked simply. "Willow. She needs the kind of specialized rehabilitation we can provide at Resilient Canine." The silence that followed felt weighted with all the practical considerations. The current capacity of their facility, the resources required for another long-term case, the unknown complications this dog might present. "We have room," Lisa said finally, "and if anyone can help her find her way back, it's you and Hope." Relief flooded through him. "Thank you, I think she's meant to be part of Hope's legacy." As he hung up, Michael looked at Hope, now dozing beside him after weeks of intense work. From starving and terrified beneath a car to helping rehabilitate disaster survivors and changing veterinary practices nationwide, her journey had expanded, far beyond anything he could have imagined that rainy day. And now, in Willow, that journey would continue through another generation of resilience and recovery. The journey home with Willow proved challenging. Unlike Hope's initial trip from the veterinary clinic years earlier, Willow couldn't be safely transported in the main cabin of the vehicle. Her fear of confinement made a crate traumatic, yet her unpredictable reactions to movement and sound made an unrestrained trip dangerous. After consultation with the shelter veterinarian, they settled on mild sedation combined with a specially configured space in the SUV's cargo area, separated from Hope by a barrier but allowing visual contact between the dogs. Every stop required careful management. Michael quickly established a routine, parking in the quietest available areas, using Hope as both companion and buffer for Willow during brief, necessary breaks, and maintaining consistent, calming communication, despite Willow's lack of response. The normally 12-hour drive stretched to nearly 18 with these accommodations, leaving both man and dogs exhausted. Lisa was waiting when they finally arrived home well after midnight, having prepared a quiet space for Willow in a separate area from Luna and Chance. The introduction to the facility needed to be carefully controlled to avoid overwhelming the traumatized dog. "She's even more shut down than I expected," Lisa whispered, as they watched Willow huddled in the corner of her new space, trembling despite the comfortable bed, water and food placed nearby. "The travel was hard on her," Michael acknowledged, "but she maintained visual contact with Hope throughout the journey. That's our foundation to build on." The next morning brought the additional challenge of introducing Willow to the resident dogs. Hope's relationship with the traumatized shepherd was already established, but Luna and Chance represented unknown factors. Michael decided to start with Luna, whose own journey from reactivity to stability might resonate with Willow's condition. The introduction took place in the neutral territory of the training yard, with all dogs on long leads, allowing choice while ensuring safety. Willow immediately pressed herself against the fence, trying to become invisible. Luna, surprisingly, demonstrated remarkable sensitivity, approaching gradually, then stopping several feet away, lying down in a non-threatening posture. "She remembers," Lisa observed quietly from where they watched. "She's showing Willow what Hope showed her." The interaction lasted only minutes before Willow's stress signals indicated she'd reached her tolerance threshold. But even this brief encounter represented progress. She had remained present rather than shutting down completely. Over the following days, a careful routine was established. Willow's rehabilitation would be measured not in dramatic breakthroughs, but in subtle shifts. The gradually decreasing tremor when humans entered her space, the moment she first took food while Michael remained in the room, the first tentative steps from her corner to sniff an object of interest when she thought no one was watching. Hope became the bridge between Willow and the human world. Where direct human interaction provoked fear, Hope's presence created a buffer that allowed proximity. Michael utilized this connection intentionally, gradually decreasing the distance between himself and the dogs during their quiet sessions together. The documentary team, having heard about Willow's arrival, requested permission to film her rehabilitation as a follow-up segment. Michael initially refused, concerned about introducing additional stress into her fragile recovery. But as weeks passed and Willow began showing signs of resilience, he reconsidered. Properly documented, her journey could help educate others about the profound impact of trauma and the patience required for healing. "We'll establish strict protocols," he told Sophia when he finally agreed. "Limited crew, specific filming times, no interference with her routine, and we stop immediately if she shows stress signals." Sophia's understanding reflected how far they'd all come in their approach to working with traumatized animals. Of course, the story matters, but her well-being comes first, always. The first filming session captured a significant milestone, Willow voluntarily approaching Hope during their daily yard time, then remaining alongside her when Michael entered with treats. Through Hope, Willow was learning that human presence could predict positive experiences rather than threat. As summer transitioned to fall, Resilient Canines programs continued expanding. Jamal had fully integrated into the team, taking primary responsibility for the facility operations while developing his skills in trauma rehabilitation. A part-time administrative assistant managed the growing volume of inquiries and workshop registrations. And Lisa had formally established the training curriculum for the certification program, with the first cohort of professional trainers scheduled to begin in January. Throughout these developments, Michael maintained his hands-on work with the resident dogs, particularly Willow. Her progress, though slower than Hope's had been, showed the steady resilience that had become the hallmark of their approach. By her third month at the facility, she was voluntarily approaching Michael for brief interactions, accepting gentle touch from Lisa, and coexisting peacefully with all 3 resident dogs during supervised sessions. The most remarkable transformation, however, was witnessed during a routine training demonstration. A small group of veterinary students had come to observe rehabilitation techniques, seated quietly at the edge of the training yard. Michael worked with Hope on advanced behaviors, demonstrating how a formerly traumatized dog could progress to complex tasks once their foundation of safety was established. Willow was present but not participating, as was typical during these sessions, allowed to observe from a distance that felt secure to her. What wasn't typical was her response when one of the students accidentally dropped a binder, creating a sudden noise that would normally send Willow retreating in fear. Instead of panicking, Willow startled, but then looked immediately to Hope, who had maintained her calm focus on Michael despite the disturbance. After a moment's hesitation, Willow settled back into her observational position, visibly taking cues from Hope's unruffled response. "Did you see that?" Lisa whispered from the sidelines. "She's using Hope as her security reference." Michael nodded, continuing the demonstration without drawing attention to the significant moment they had just witnessed. This was the essence of their methodology in action. One resilient dog showing another that recovery was possible, that responses could be recalibrated, that the world could be safe again. That evening, reviewing the day's events in their nightly debrief, Michael and Lisa discussed Willow's progress and next steps for her rehabilitation. The question of her eventual placement remained open, whether she would join their permanent resident dogs or, like most of their rehabilitation cases, eventually be placed in a carefully selected adoptive home. "She's forming her strongest bonds with Hope, not with humans," Lisa observed. "That might indicate she'd do best in a home with a confident, stable dog who can continue being her guide." Michael considered this thoughtfully, watching through the window as Hope and Willow rested together in the yard. Hope's steady presence, a constant reassurance to the still recovering shepherd. "Maybe," he agreed. "But I also wonder if she might have a different purpose here, the way she watches everything we do with Hope, how she's beginning to model Hope's behaviors. She could become another bridge dog for future cases." The possibility resonated with both of them, that Willow might transform from rescued to rescuer, extending Hope's legacy through a new generation of trauma rehabilitation. It was too soon to know for certain, but the potential felt right, a continuation of the circle that had begun beneath an abandoned car on a rainy day. As darkness fell, Michael called the dogs in from the yard. Hope responded immediately, trotting toward the house with her characteristic confidence. Behind her, hesitating only briefly, Willow followed, finding her path forward by following in Hope's footsteps. Winter arrived with unexpected severity, blanketing resilient canines' property in snow and ice that transformed daily operations. The training yard became temporarily unusable. Indoor sessions grew more crowded, and the rehabilitation dogs faced new challenges as their outdoor access was limited by the harsh conditions. Yet the season brought unexpected gifts as well. The forced proximity indoors accelerated Willow's acclimation to human activity. With Hope constantly demonstrating calm acceptance of the household routine, Willow began mirroring this behavior, first in small ways, then with increasing confidence. "She's watching Hope for cues about everything," Michael observed one evening as they reviewed footage from the facility's monitoring cameras. "Look at how she matches her posture, her attention patterns, even the timing of when she allows herself to relax." On screen, the evidence was clear. When Hope settled on her bed during a busy volunteer training session, Willow would wait exactly 17 seconds before lowering herself to her own nearby bed. When Hope accepted treats from a new staff member, Willow would watch intently, then cautiously accept food from the same person approximately 2 minutes later. She's not just being influenced by Hope, Lisa realized. She's strategically using Hope as her safety assessment system. It's incredibly sophisticated behavior, This insight reshaped their approach to Willow's ongoing rehabilitation. Rather than working directly to build her confidence with humans, they focused on creating situations where Hope could demonstrate trust and positive engagement, allowing Willow to follow at her own pace. The breakthrough came during a rare sunny day when the training yard was briefly accessible. Michael was working with Hope on scent detection exercises, a mentally stimulating activity that channeled her natural abilities. Willow watched from her usual observation spot, alert but removed from the activity. Halfway through the session, Michael made a deliberate choice. Without looking directly at Willow, he placed a second scent article several feet from Hope's working area, then returned to his position. Hope found her target quickly, receiving enthusiastic praise and rewards. For several minutes, nothing happened. Hope continued her exercises while Willow observed. Then, tentatively, Willow approached the second scent article. With frequent glances toward Hope to confirm all was well, she investigated the object, eventually nosing it as she had seen Hope do. "Willow," Michael called softly, deliberately using the same encouraging tone he used with Hope. "Good girl." Willow startled at being directly addressed, but didn't retreat. After a moment's hesitation, she looked from Michael to Hope, who was calmly waiting for her next direction, then back to Michael. The cognitive processing was visible in her expression, the connection being made between Hope's confidence and her own safety. Slowly, with careful movements, Michael approached. Treat extended. For the first time, Willow took the reward without backing away, maintaining her position as she ate it. A small moment perhaps to an outside observer, but a monumental shift in her rehabilitation journey. That evening, Michael documented the interaction in detail for the case file, adding it to the timeline of Willow's progress. The pattern was becoming clear. Willow was developing not just through her own experiences, but through witnessing Hope's example. It was a reminder of how social learning could accelerate healing in ways direct training could not replicate. The winter months brought another significant development. The documentary, featuring resilient canines' work, had been selected for a prestigious film festival, bringing renewed attention to their methodology. More importantly, several veterinary schools had incorporated segments of the film into their behavioral medicine curriculum, expanding the impact beyond what Michael had imagined possible. This recognition led to an invitation that required careful consideration, a six-city speaking tour sponsored by a coalition of animal welfare organizations. The opportunity to share Resilient Canine's approach with thousands of shelter workers, veterinarians, and rescue volunteers was compelling. But the 2-week absence would be the longest Michael had been away from the facility since its establishment. "You have to go," Lisa insisted when he expressed hesitation. "This is exactly how we scale our impact. Jamal and I can manage things here, and the certification students will be finished with their intensive training period before you leave." The deciding factor, unexpectedly, was Willow. Her progress had accelerated to the point where she was now consistently engaging with the core team members, participating in basic training activities, and showing resilience when faced with minor environmental changes. Her dependence on Hope's presence had decreased as her own confidence grew, a sign of successful healing. "I think you're right," Michael agreed finally. "The timing works, and bringing Hope along will demonstrate the results of our methodology better than any presentation ever could." Preparations for the tour consumed the following weeks. Lisa developed visual materials showcasing before and after progressions of their most successful cases. Jamal created a detailed management plan for the facility during Michael's absence, and Michael focused on ensuring Hope was prepared for the travel demands and public appearances, refreshing her comfort with different environments and unfamiliar handling. The night before their departure, a special moment occurred that seemed to bring their journey full circle. As Michael packed the last of his presentation materials, he noticed Willow had quietly entered his office, a space she had previously avoided due to its confined nature. More remarkably, she had come alone, without Hope's accompanying presence. For several minutes she simply stood in the doorway, watching him work. Then, with deliberate steps, she approached his chair, briefly pressed her muzzle against his hand, and retreated to the hallway. The interaction lasted less than 10 seconds, but its significance was profound. Her first completely voluntary, solo initiation of human contact. Michael found Lisa in the kitchen, emotion making his voice unsteady as he described what had happened. She chose to connect. Not because Hope showed her it was safe, not because we engineered the situation. She decided on her own. Lisa's eyes glistened with understanding. She's finding her own path now. As they stood together, Michael reflected on the journey from that first rainy day. Hope had been transformed from a terrified, starving creature into a confident, purpose-filled partner in their mission. And now, Willow was beginning her own transformation, not just as a recipient of their methodology, but potentially as its next ambassador. The first snowfall of that winter day when he'd found Hope had seemed like terrible timing, a wrong turn made worse by bad weather. Yet that apparent misfortune had set in motion a cascade of life-changing events. A reminder that sometimes the most difficult beginnings led to the most meaningful journeys. Tomorrow, he and Hope would set out to share that message with thousands of people who could extend its impact far beyond what they could accomplish alone. And Willow would continue her healing at home, perhaps one day joining them in showing others what resilience truly meant. The 6-city speaking tour surpassed all expectations. In each location, Michael and Hope were met with overflow crowds. Shelter workers, rescue volunteers, veterinary professionals, and dog trainers eager to learn about trauma-informed rehabilitation. Hope's presence on stage provided living proof of what was possible, her calm confidence in the spotlight contrasting sharply with the before videos Michael shared of her initial condition. "The most powerful moment isn't when I talk about the methodology," Michael told Lisa during their nightly calls. "It's when I finish speaking and Hope approaches audience members during the Q&A. Seeing her choose to engage with strangers after everything she's been through, that's what convinces people this work matters." While Michael and Hope were building connections across the country, Lisa and Jamal maintained operations at Resilient Canine. The first cohort of certified trainers had completed their intensive program and returned to their respective organizations, extending the methodology to shelters and rescue groups nationwide. And Willow continued her steady progress, finding her place within the facility's routine. "She actually solicited play from Luna today," Lisa reported during one call. "Not just tolerating interaction, but initiating it, bounced into a play, bow and everything." These developments reflected the expanding ripples of impact stemming from that single rescue years earlier. Each rehabilitated dog, each trained professional, each audience member who implemented the techniques in their own work, all extended Hope's legacy beyond what Michael could have imagined when he first coaxed her from beneath that car. The final stop on the tour was in the same city where Michael had found Hope, creating a symmetry that wasn't lost on him as he prepared for the largest presentation yet. The venue, a university auditorium, had sold out weeks in advance, with additional registrants accommodated via live stream to satellite locations. Before the event, a local news team requested an interview, interested in the hometown connection to Resilient Canine's origins. The reporter, a thoughtful woman named Kendra, had clearly done her research. "You've spoken about how finding Hope changed your life's direction," she noted as cameras rolled. "But I'm curious, what do you think would have happened to you if you hadn't taken that wrong turn that day?" The question gave Michael pause. He glanced at Hope, now resting calmly at his feet despite the lights and equipment surrounding them. "I think I would have continued on autopilot," he answered finally. I had a comfortable job, a structured routine. But there was an emptiness I hadn't fully acknowledged until Hope showed me another way to live, with purpose, with connection, with meaning. And what would you say to someone who might be driving past their own hope today? Maybe not literally a dog under a car, but an opportunity to make a difference that seems inconvenient or challenging. I'd say that sometimes the most important turns in our lives don't appear on any map, Michael replied. The moments that seem like detours or mistakes might actually be directing us toward our true purpose. The question is whether we're willing to stop and pay attention. That evening's presentation became the emotional culmination of the tour. The auditorium fell silent as Michael shared Hope's complete journey, from the skeletal, terrified dog beneath the car to the confident ambassador beside him on stage. When he introduced the video footage of Willow's recent breakthrough, demonstrating how Hope's influence was now helping another traumatized dog find her way back, audible responses of emotion rippled through the audience. This is how healing multiplies, Michael explained as the lights came up, not just through formal programs or methodologies, but through living examples of resilience that inspire the same quality in others. The standing ovation that followed lasted nearly 2 minutes. As audience members lined up to speak with him afterward, Michael was struck by a common thread in their comments. Many shared stories of their own wrong turns that had led to unexpected purpose, of rescue animals who had ultimately rescued them in return. One elderly gentleman waited until the crowd had thinned before approaching. "I wanted you to know," he said quietly. "Your work saved my dog's life. After seeing your documentary, I understood what was happening with my rescue terrier. He wasn't aggressive, he was terrified. Your methods helped me reach him when 3 trainers had given up." These personal impacts, multiplied across thousands of individual interactions, represented the true measure of resilient canine success. Beyond the recognition, beyond the facility's growth, beyond the professional accolades, this was what mattered most to Michael. Tangible differences in the lives of traumatized animals and the humans who loved them. The journey home felt like crossing a significant threshold. The tour had confirmed what Michael had sensed for some time. Their methodology had reached a tipping point, gaining enough momentum within the professional community to sustain its own growth. The focus now could shift from evangelizing the approach to refining and expanding its applications. Hope seemed to sense the completion of this chapter as well. Throughout the tour, she had performed her ambassador role flawlessly, adapting to hotel rooms, auditorium stages, and constant interaction with strangers. But as they turned onto the long driveway leading to Resilient Canine, her posture changed, relaxing into the familiar territory of home, her purpose fulfilled for now. Lisa, Jamal, and the facility dogs were waiting to welcome them. Luna and Chance greeted Hope with their usual enthusiasm, while Willow held back initially, observing from a slight distance. But as Hope moved toward her after greeting the others, something remarkable happened. Willow stepped forward to meet her halfway, initiating their reunion with newfound confidence. "She's been like that all week," Lisa reported as they settled. "Inside, more decisive, more self-directed. It's like she found her own voice while you were gone." That evening, reviewing video updates of the facility's progress during their absence, Michael and Lisa discussed next steps for Resilient Canine. The speaking tour had generated significant interest in their certification program, with applications coming from as far away as Australia and Japan. The documentary's international release was scheduled for the following month, and several research veterinarians had proposed formal studies to quantify the efficacy of their methodology. "We're at an inflection point," Lisa observed. "We need to decide how much to expand versus how much to focus on refining what we've built." As they weighed these considerations, Michael found his attention drawn to the monitoring feed, showing the dogs in their evening routine. Hope had settled in her favorite spot in the living room, with Luna and Chance in their usual positions, nearby. What caught his attention was Willow's location, not in her typical corner observing from a distance, but centered among the other dogs, visibly relaxed and secure in her place within the group. The image embodied everything resilient canine represented, not just rehabilitation, but true reintegration, not just survival, but genuine thriving. From Hope's transformation had grown an approach that was now helping countless animals reclaim their lives after trauma. "I think we do both," Michael said finally, still watching the peaceful scene. "We expand carefully, making sure quality isn't sacrificed for scale. And we keep refining, learning from each case, each dog, each new application of the methodology." Lisa followed his gaze to the monitor, understanding the source of his inspiration, balance, just like they've found with each other. Outside, snow began falling gently, echoing that fateful day when a wrong turn and bad weather had led Michael to Hope. What had seemed like misfortune had become the foundation for a mission that continued to grow, touching lives both human and canine in ways that expanded with each passing year. The journey that began with one starving, terrified dog had become a movement, a testament to the transformative power of compassion, patience, and the resilience that could be awakened in even the most traumatized hearts. Spring brought significant transitions for Resilient Canine. The international release of the documentary generated a new wave of interest, with inquiries coming from rescue organizations across Europe, Asia, and Australia. The research partnership with the veterinary school was officially launched, creating protocols to scientifically measure the effectiveness of trauma-informed rehabilitation methods, and the certification program expanded to accommodate quarterly cohorts rather than annual ones. These developments placed increasing demands on Michael's time, pulling him away from the hands-on work that remained his passion. Administrative responsibilities, media interviews, and consultation requests consumed his days, creating a growing tension between Resilient Canine's expanding mission and its founder's well-being. "You need to delegate more," Lisa observed one evening, finding Michael still at his desk long after dinner. "This pace isn't sustainable." He sighed, rubbing his eyes. "I know, but so much of what we do is built on personal connection. People want to hear from me, to see hope, to understand how it all began. It's hard to transfer that to someone else." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. The success of their mission was creating distance from the hands-on work that had inspired it. Finding a balance would require restructuring not just Resilient Canine's operations, but Michael's relationship to the organization he had founded. The solution began taking shape during a particularly challenging rehabilitation case. A Malinois named Rex had been confiscated from a situation of severe neglect, showing extreme defensive aggression toward handlers. After traditional behavior modification had failed at 2 shelters, he was transferred to Resilient Canine as a last resort before euthanasia would be considered. Michael had initially planned to lead Rex's rehabilitation personally, but conflicting commitments forced him to delegate primary responsibility to Jamal, with Lisa providing support. Though he participated in assessment and planning, the day-to-day implementation fell to the team. 3 weeks into Rex's rehabilitation, Michael finally found time to observe a complete session. What he witnessed was revealing. Jamal working with quiet confidence, implementing the methodology with personal adaptations that revealed deep understanding of the underlying principles. More surprisingly, Willow was present alongside Hope, both dogs demonstrating calm, appropriate behavior that visibly influenced Rex's gradually decreasing tension. "When did Willow start participating in rehabilitation sessions?" Michael asked, afterward, unable to hide his amazement. "About 2 weeks ago," Jamal explained. "We noticed Rex responding better when multiple stable dogs were present. A pack context seemed to reassure him. Hope is still the primary model, but Willow offers something different. She shows him the transition process, if that makes sense. Hope shows the end goal, but Willow demonstrates the journey." This insight crystallized something Michael had been sensing but hadn't fully articulated. Resilient Canine's methodology had evolved beyond its founder. The principles he had developed through Hope's rehabilitation were now being enhanced, refined, and expanded by a team that brought their own experiences and insights to the work. That evening, Michael, Lisa, and Jamal sat down for a conversation that would reshape Resilient Canine's future. With honest communication, they outlined a new organizational structure. Jamal would become Director of Rehabilitation, overseeing the daily program for resident dogs. Lisa would formalize her role as Director of Education, managing the certification, program and outreach initiatives. And Michael would step into a new position as founder and strategic advisor, focusing on expanding their impact through carefully selected speaking engagements, content creation, and partnership development. "This isn't about stepping back," Lisa emphasized, sensing Michael's hesitation. "It's about leveraging your unique contributions while allowing the organization to grow beyond what any one person can manage." The transition would take time, but the foundation was established that evening, a structure that honored Resilient Canine's origins while creating sustainability for its future. The changes would allow Michael to reconnect with the elements of the work that energized rather than depleted him, while empowering team members to develop their own expertise. Implementation began immediately, with Michael gradually transferring responsibilities to Jamal and Lisa over the following weeks. The process revealed both challenges and unexpected benefits. Some external partners initially expressed disappointment at not working directly with Michael, but most came to appreciate the depth of knowledge the entire team possessed. And internally, staff members responded positively to clearer leadership structures and growth opportunities. Most revealing was the dog's response to the reorganization. Hope, now 7 years old and comfortable in her ambassador role, seamlessly adapted to working with different handlers during demonstrations and training sessions. Luna and Chance, as permanent residents, maintained their established routines with minimal disruption, and Willow continued her remarkable evolution from traumatized rescue to rehabilitation assistant, seemingly thriving with the increased structure and purpose. One afternoon, about 2 months into the transition, Michael took advantage of a rare block of unscheduled time to observe the daily operations from a new perspective. Moving between different areas of the facility, he watched team members implementing protocols he had developed, adapting them thoughtfully to each dog's needs, and collaborating with an efficiency that hadn't been possible in Resilient Canine's early days. In the main training yard, Jamal was working with Rex, whose transformation was becoming evident in his increasingly relaxed body language and willingness to engage. Hope and Willow were present, lying calmly nearby, their peaceful presence creating the secure environment that allowed Rex's defenses to gradually lower. What struck Michael most powerfully was watching Willow. When Rex showed momentary tension, at a training assistant's sudden movement, Hope remained steadily calm, her typical response based on her complete rehabilitation. But Willow's reaction told a more nuanced story. She noticed Rex's anxiety, briefly acknowledged it with attentive ears, then deliberately relaxed again, demonstrating not obliviousness to the potential threat, but a conscious choice to remain calm despite awareness. This subtle interaction embodied the essence of what Resilient Canine taught: Not the absence of fear or trauma, but the development of resilience that allowed forward movement despite past experiences. Willow wasn't showing Rex that there was nothing to fear. She was showing him how to respond to fear with growing confidence rather than reactivity. As Michael continued his observations throughout the facility, a profound realization settled over him. What had begun as a personal journey with Hope had evolved into something that now extended far beyond them both. A methodology, a philosophy, an organization with its own momentum and future. His role had shifted from being the sole carrier of this work to becoming its steward, nurturing its growth while allowing it to evolve beyond his individual vision. That evening, sitting on the porch with Hope beside him as the sun set over Resilient Canine's property, Michael felt a deep sense of completion, not an ending, but a fulfillment of what had begun that rainy day when he'd made an unplanned turn and noticed movement beneath an abandoned car. Hope, sensing his reflective mood, pressed against his leg in the way she had since those early days, a gesture of connection that had remained consistent even as everything else transformed around them. Her muzzle now showed touches of grey, her eyes carrying the wisdom of years rather than the wariness of trauma. She had travelled an extraordinary journey from starving and terrified to confident and purposeful. And in helping her find that path, Michael had discovered his own. 1 year after Resilient Canine's restructuring, the organization marked a significant milestone, its 5th anniversary. What had begun as Michael's personal journey with Hope had evolved into a nationally recognized program with 23 staff members, regular training cohorts, and a wait list for rehabilitation cases from across the country. To commemorate the occasion, the team organized an open house event, inviting supporters, partners, and, most meaningfully, families who had adopted dogs rehabilitated through their program. The property was transformed with information stations highlighting different aspects of their methodology, demonstration areas where visitors could observe training techniques, and a central gathering space for presentations. "Did you ever imagine this?" Lisa asked as they surveyed the preparations on the morning of the event. Dozens of volunteers were setting up tents, arranging chairs, and preparing for the expected crowd of several hundred attendees. Michael shook his head, watching as Jamal coordinated the final details for the rehabilitation demonstrations. "Not even close. I just wanted to help one dog that day." The event began at noon, with visitors streaming through the entrance to explore the various stations. Michael and Hope greeted people at the welcome area. The German Shepherd, now a dignified 8-year-old whose calm presence still had the power to move those familiar with her story. Throughout the afternoon, different team members led presentations on aspects of trauma rehabilitation, from environmental modifications to counter-conditioning techniques. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Jamal's session on reading canine body language drew a particularly large audience, with Rex, now 5 months into his rehabilitation, demonstrating remarkable progress from his initially aggressive state. But the most powerful moments came during what had been labeled simply as reunion hour on the schedule. As the afternoon sun began its descent, former residents of Resilient Canine returned with their adoptive families, each representing a success story of rehabilitation and resilience. A once fearful border collie mix named Scout bounded confidently across the yard to greet Michael, remembering him despite 2 years in his forever home. A formerly reactive mastiff named Brutus, who had once required a muzzle for all interactions, now calmly accepted affection from strangers under his owner's proud gaze. A previously shut-down terrier named Penny, who had spent her first month at Resilient Canine, motionless in her bed, now performed tricks with joyful enthusiasm for delighted onlookers. As Michael moved among these reunions, he was struck by a pattern that emerged in conversations with the adoptive families. Time and again, they described how their rehabilitated dogs had changed their own lives, teaching patience, resilience, and new ways of communicating that extended beyond their canine relationships. After learning to read Brutus's subtle stress signals, I started noticing my daughter showing the same signs before her anxiety attacks, one father confided. We got her help early because of what you taught us about watching for those micro-expressions. A middle-aged woman with a once-traumatized shepherd mix explained how the rehabilitation process had helped her healing journey as well. Working through Bella's triggers helped me recognize and address my own trauma responses. We've healed together. These testimonials affirmed something Michael had sensed, but never articulated so clearly. The ripple effects of trauma rehabilitation extended far beyond the dogs themselves, touching human lives in profound and unexpected ways. The day's formal program culminated in a brief ceremony recognizing resilient canines' journey and key contributors. Jamal had arranged a special tribute, collecting video messages from certified trainers now implementing the methodology in shelters and rescue organizations across the country. Their stories of transformed dogs and practices created a powerful testament to the program's expanding impact. As the formal presentations concluded and the gathering transitioned to a more casual reception, Michael found a quiet moment to slip away with hope. They walked to a small rise overlooking the property, where the full scope of what had grown from their partnership was visible: the training facilities, rehabilitation kennels, education center, and administrative offices that now comprised Resilient Canine's campus. Hope settled beside him, her steady presence a constant through all the changes of the past 5 years. Though slowing slightly with age, she remained active in her ambassador role, seemingly understanding the importance of her visible recovery in inspiring hope for other traumatized dogs. Michael's reflections were interrupted by approaching footsteps. Lisa joined them, followed by Willow, who had developed a special bond with her during the past year. At 4 years old, Willow had completed a remarkable transformation. From the shut-down, traumatized dog rescued from the hurricane aftermath to a confident, balanced assistant in the rehabilitation program. "There you are," Lisa said, settling beside them on the grass. "Hiding from your own party? Just taking it all in," Michael replied, gesturing toward the gathering below, trying to connect the dots between that rainy day and all of this. As they watched the celebration continue, a staff member appeared at the base of the hill, waving to catch their attention. "Sorry to interrupt," she called, "but there's someone here who specifically asked to meet you and Hope. He says it's important." Curious, they made their way back to the main event area, where a tall man in his 60s waited near the welcome tent. His weathered face broke into a smile as they approached. "Mr. Jenkins, I'm Thomas Brennan," he introduced himself. "My family used to own Hope, or Athena as we called her then." The name sent Michael back years to the early days at the veterinary clinic when they'd discovered Hope's original identity and owners. "The Brennans," he recalled. "You moved cross-country and left Athena with a neighbor." Thomas nodded, his expression growing solemn. "A decision I've regretted every day since learning what happened to her. We trusted the wrong person, and she suffered terribly for it." Hope, seemingly recognizing something familiar about this stranger, moved slightly closer to him, sniffing with interest but showing no sign of distress. Whether she actually remembered him after so many years was impossible to know, but her calm acceptance was remarkable regardless. "I followed your work with her for years," Thomas continued, "saw the documentary, read your book. I never reached out because I was ashamed of my part in her story. But when I heard about today's event, I felt I needed to come, to see her, to thank you, and maybe to find some closure." The honesty of his words touched Michael deeply. Here was yet another life changed by the ripples extending from Hope's rescue, a man carrying years of regret, finding some measure of peace in seeing her transformation. "She's had an amazing life," Michael assured him. "The trauma she experienced was terrible, but she's used it to help countless other dogs find their way back." As they talked, sharing perspectives from different chapters of Hope's story, the sun began to set over Resilient Canine's property. Below them, the gathering continued. Staff, volunteers, supporters, and families connected by a shared belief in second chances and the healing power of compassion. In that moment, the full circle of Hope's journey became clear. What had begun as one man stopping to help one suffering dog had expanded into a movement that transformed lives across the country, both canine and human. The random wrong turn, on a rainy day, had proved to be exactly the right direction, leading Michael not just to hope, but to his true purpose. And Hope, once starving and afraid beneath an abandoned car, now stood tall as a living testament to resilience. Her legacy extending far beyond her own remarkable recovery to touch thousands of lives she would never meet. 10 years had passed since that rainy day when Michael Jenkins had found a starving German shepherd beneath an abandoned car. A decade of transformation, growth and impact that had exceeded anything he could have imagined when he first extended his hand to a terrified dog with nothing left to give. Resilient Canine had evolved from a personal mission into an internationally recognized organization with satellite facilities in 3 states and a certification program that had trained over 500 professionals worldwide. The methodology Michael had developed through Hope's rehabilitation was now implemented in shelters across the country, with research validating its effectiveness in reducing euthanasia rates for behaviorally challenged dogs. On this particular autumn morning, Michael walked slowly along the memorial pathway that had been established on the original Resilient Canine property. Stone markers commemorated the dogs whose journeys had shaped the organization's development, each accompanied by before and after photographs and a brief story of transformation. He paused at Luna's marker, installed 3 years earlier when she had passed peacefully at age 11 after a brief illness. The fierce, reactive dog, who had once been deemed unadoptable, had spent 8 years as a beloved family member and rehabilitation assistant, her story inspiring countless owners of aggressive dogs to seek help rather than surrender. A few steps further stood Chance's memorial. The brindle dog rescued from the streets had lived a shorter life than hoped, medical complications from his early malnutrition eventually catching up with him. But his 5 years at Resilient Canine had been filled with purpose as one of their most effective rehabilitation assistants for fearful cases. Michael continued along the path, acknowledging each marker with quiet respect. Every dog remembered here had contributed something unique to Resilient Canine's evolution, their individual journeys becoming threads in the larger tapestry of the organization's mission. At the pathway's end stood a simple wooden bench overlooking the training yard, where Jamal was currently working with a group of certification students. Beside the bench lay Hope, now almost 13 years old, her muzzle completely grey, but her eyes still bright with the intelligence and presence that had made her such an extraordinary partner in this journey. Age had slowed her considerably. Arthritis limited her mobility, and her hearing had diminished. Yet she maintained an undeniable dignity, a serene confidence that continued to affect everyone who met her. Though retired from active rehabilitation work, she still made appearances at special events, her very presence a testament to the possibility of healing after trauma. Michael settled on the bench, his hand automatically finding the spot behind Hope's ear that she had always loved. She leaned into his touch with a contented sigh, her loyalty and connection undiminished by time. "There you are," Lisa's voice came from behind them, She joined them on the bench, her hand finding Michael's free one. 10 years together, 6 of them as husband and wife, had created a seamless partnership, both personally and professionally. "Just taking a walk through memory lane," Michael explained, gesturing toward the pathway, remembering where it all started. Lisa nodded, understanding the significance of this particular date, the 10th anniversary of Hope's rescue. "The film crew will be here at noon," she reminded him gently. "Are you ready for the interview?" The documentary team that had initially chronicled Resilient Canine's early development was returning to create a 10th anniversary follow-up, capturing the organization's evolution and expanding impact. Michael had initially hesitated to participate, concerned about Hope's energy levels, but ultimately recognized the importance of documenting this milestone in their journey. "I think so," he replied, "though I'm not sure what wisdom I have to offer that hasn't already been said." "Just share what's in your heart," Lisa suggested. "That's always been more than enough." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the training session below. Willow, now 10 years old and fully established as a senior rehabilitation specialist, was demonstrating proper interaction techniques with the newly arrived rescue. Her transformation from traumatized survivor to confident teacher embodied Resilient Canine's core philosophy that trauma need not be the end of a story, but could become a chapter in a journey toward greater purpose. The sound of a vehicle approaching drew their attention. Rather than the documentary crew, it was Sophia, the original filmmaker who had documented Hope's story. She had remained connected to Resilient Canine over the years, her career flourishing, as she specialized in stories of animal-human connections. "I wanted to come early," she explained, joining them at the bench, "before all the formal interviews begin, to see you both where it all started." Michael welcomed her with a warm embrace. "It's fitting that you're here today. You helped tell Hope's story when few people understood what we were trying to do." Sophia knelt to greet Hope, gently stroking the aging dog's head. The Grande, Dame herself, still holding court after all these years. As they reminisced about the early days, a commotion at the main entrance caught their attention. A staff member was escorting a young woman toward them, her expression suggesting this was an unscheduled visit. "I'm sorry to interrupt," the staff member called as they approached, "but Ms. Ramirez says she's traveled quite far specifically to meet Hope and Michael today. She knew about the anniversary." The visitor, a woman in her late 20s with a quiet intensity, stepped forward. "I'm Elena Ramirez. I run a rehabilitation program for traumatized dogs in Mexico City. Your work, Hope's story, it changed everything for me and for hundreds of dogs in my country." Michael welcomed her, though he sensed there was more to this unexpected visit than professional admiration. "I brought something to show you," Elena continued, pulling out her phone and opening a photo album. "This is my Hope." The screen showed a severely emaciated German Shepherd mix, her condition hauntingly similar to Hope's when Michael had first found her. Subsequent photos documented a transformation that paralleled Hope's journey, from skeletal and terrified to healthy and engaged. She was chained outside an abandoned building for months after her owners fled during the earthquake, Elena explained. "Everyone said she was too damaged, too aggressive to save. But I had seen your documentary. I knew what was possible." As Elena swiped through the photos, Michael recognized the methodologies he had developed, the careful environmental management, the use of stable dogs as behavioral models, the patient rebuilding of trust. She had implemented Resilient Canine's approach with remarkable fidelity, despite being self-taught through the documentary and online resources. "She became my first success story," Elena continued. "And from there, we built a program that has now rehabilitated over 200 dogs that would have otherwise been euthanized, all because Hope showed us what was possible." The simplicity and sincerity of her words crystallized something Michael had felt but never fully articulated. Hope's legacy extended far beyond the dogs she had directly helped, far beyond resilient canines' formal programs, far beyond anything they could measure or track. Her story had taken on a life of its own, inspiring people like Elena to believe in second chances and to act on that belief in ways that created exponential impact. As the documentary crew arrived and began setting up for the interviews, Michael found himself reflecting on the true meaning of the day. 10 years earlier, he had made a split-second decision to stop for a suffering dog, never imagining where that single act of compassion would lead to a transformed life for himself, to hundreds of rehabilitated dogs, to an organization that had changed practices nationwide, to inspired individuals like Elena, creating their own ripples of impact around the world. For the camera, he would articulate resilient canines' methodology, share statistics on their success rates, and outline their plans for future growth. But the heart of the story remained as simple as it had been on that rainy day, one person stopping to help one suffering creature, and in the process, discovering a purpose that would touch countless lives. Hope stirred beside him, slowly rising to her feet as the film crew approached. Despite her arthritis, she carried herself with quiet dignity, her gaze direct and engaged. In her aging face, Michael could still see traces of the frightened dog she had once been, but those memories were now just chapters in a much larger story of resilience, purpose, and profound connection. As the interview began, the first question was the one Michael had been asked countless times over the years. Looking back 10 years later, what would you say to someone who sees an animal in need but hesitates to get involved because of the potential complications or commitment? Michael's answer came from the deepest truth of his experience. I would tell them that what looks like an inconvenient detour might actually be the path you were meant to find all along. That the most meaningful journeys often begin with a simple choice to stop, to see suffering, and to do something about it, even when the outcome is uncertain. Hope leaned against his leg, her presence a testament to that uncertainty transformed into purpose. 10 years ago, she had been a starving, traumatized dog with an unknown future. Today, she was the cornerstone of a movement that had saved thousands of lives and changed the landscape of animal rehabilitation. As the camera captured this moment, an aging dog and the man who had saved her, now surrounded by the legacy they had built together, the essence of their extraordinary journey could be distilled to its simplest form. Compassion, given freely, in a moment of need, had the power to create ripples of transformation that extended far beyond what anyone could predict or measure. And in a world often defined by complexity, perhaps that was the most important message of all. Up next, you got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.